It's funny how a single night can split your life into a before and an after. Graduation night was that for me, a swirl of flashing cameras, sticky auditorium seats, and the kind of laughter that sounds like both celebration and goodbye. My chest was buzzing with this cocktail of excitement and dread, because I knew everything was about to change. My best friend Sam and I had spent 4 years glued at the hip, inside jokes whispered in the back row, 1,000 text threads, secrets scribbled on notebook corners. That night, everyone else was hugging, shouting, tossing mortarboards. Sam found me in the chaos, eyes shining but face a little tight around the edges. "Hey, come here," Sam said, tugging me by the sleeve away from the crowd. We slipped outside, where the air was thick with June humidity and the distant thump of music from someone's trunk. Sam was holding something, a box, gift-wrapped in silver paper, the corners a little squashed. I remember the way my fingers tingled when Sam pressed it into my hands. "Don't open it yet," Sam said, voice low. "Promise me you'll wait until you get to college." I frowned, feeling the box's weight, too light to be clothes, too heavy to be a letter. "Why? Are you serious?" Sam smiled, but it was shaky, nothing like the grin I knew from 1,000 sleepovers. "Just, promise?" I shrugged. "Okay, I promise." Sam exhaled, some tension dropping from their shoulders. We stood there, not talking, just listening to the cicadas and the distant whoops from the gym. For a second, I thought Sam might say something huge, some last confession before we both left town. But instead, Sam just squeezed my hand, grinned, and said, "You're gonna love college." I held the box all night. Through the pizza at midnight, the blurry selfies, the last walk through our empty school halls. It sat at my feet while we crashed at my place, half asleep on the living room carpet, TV flickering blue and white. I remember tracing my thumb over the wrap, wondering if it was a joke, or a dare, or something I'd never expect. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a mouth like sandpaper. Sunlight spilled across the living room, catching on empty soda cans and crumpled napkins. The box was gone. I sat up fast, heart suddenly pounding. I searched under pillows, behind the couch, even checked the fridge, nothing. I asked everyone, my sister, my mom, the 3 friends who'd crashed on the floor. Nobody had seen it. Sam was already gone when I called. "Hey, did you take the box back?" I asked, trying to sound casual. There was a pause on the other end. "What box?" Sam said, way too quickly. "The graduation gift. The one you gave me last night." "Oh, I don't know. Maybe someone moved it." Sam's voice was tight, and then, "I gotta go, my parents are making me pack." "Talk soon?" But we didn't talk soon. We texted a little that summer, but it was never the same. College swept us both into new lives, new friends, new cities. Every time I thought about asking Sam, something in me hesitated. Maybe I was scared of sounding desperate. Maybe I didn't want to admit how much that missing box bugged me. Over time, the memory faded, like a dream that gets grainier every time you replay it. Still, every now and then, I'd think about that night, the silver paper, the promise I made, and the way Sam looked at me under the streetlight, like there was something huge they wanted to say but couldn't. And I never once guessed that the box would find its way back to me, years later, let alone that it would blow up everything I thought I knew about my best friend. If you've ever lost touch with someone who used to feel like your entire world, you know how it seeps in slowly, the distance, the silence. After high school, Sam and I made big, optimistic promises to stay close. We swore we'd FaceTime every week, visit on breaks, keep our inside jokes alive even as we moved hours apart for college. But life crept in, quietly, between classes and new friends and late-night study sessions. And always, under the surface, there was the thing neither of us talked about, the missing gift. It started subtly. The first semester, we texted constantly, our phones buzzing with memes and "you won't believe what happened" messages. But after a while, my replies lagged. Sam's did too. I'd see a photo of them at a party with new friends, and I'd wonder how much I still fit into their world. Calls would go unanswered, or we'd talk and it felt like dancing around something invisible. I could feel the silence growing, like a bruise under the skin. One weekend, Sam visited my campus. It was supposed to be fun, our great reunion, just like old times. But we wandered the quad, making awkward small talk. When I brought up graduation, Sam's eyes flickered away. "Wild night," they said, trying to laugh it off, but their voice was tight. I almost asked about the gift. I didn't. The tension hung between us, sticky and electric, like the air before a summer storm. After that, we drifted. Our calls got shorter. Birthdays turned into quick texts. I convinced myself it was normal, that we were just busy. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder why I'd never just asked, "Hey, what happened to that box? Why did it matter so much? Why did it feel like unfinished business, that thing I couldn't let go?" The years rolled on. College blurred by. New faces, new routines. But every so often, I'd remember Sam's face in the glow of streetlights that graduation night, the way they'd pressed that box into my hands and begged, "Don't open it until you're in college, okay? Promise me." I'd remember the way their hands shook, how I'd stuffed the box in my backpack, and how, by midnight, it was just gone. Then, yesterday, everything changed. I came home from class, juggling my keys and a bag of groceries, already annoyed at the world. That's when I saw it, propped against my apartment door. A box, wrapped in faded blue paper, corners battered and soft. My heart skipped. I dropped the keys, groceries thunking to the floor, milk nearly tipping over. I crouched down, staring at it. It couldn't be. But it was. The same size, the same awkward wrapping, like someone had tried to make it nice but didn't quite know how. My hand shook as I picked it up. It was heavier than I remembered, solid, almost humming with weight. The tape was yellowed, peeling at the edges, and there was a sticker half torn away from one corner, like it had been through a lot. And on top, a note. Folded, tucked under the ribbon. My name in Sam's handwriting, careful, looping letters I'd recognize anywhere, even after all this time. The scent of old paper and a faint trace of Sam's perfume, something citrusy and sharp, hit me. The world narrowed to just me and this box, my breath echoing in my ears. I carried it inside, heart hammering, and set it on my desk. The apartment was silent, except for the low hum of my mini fridge and the distant thump of my upstairs neighbor's music. I stared at the box. My palms felt clammy. My mind spun. There was the note. I slid it free, hands trembling. My voice sounded strange in the tiny kitchen as I read it aloud. "If you're reading this, I guess it finally found you. I'm sorry it took so long. I hope you're ready to know what was inside. I hope you're okay. Sam." That was it. No explanation, no apology, just those few lines. I read it again, searching for hidden meaning. My stomach twisted. Was this some kind of joke? Why now, after all these years? Why not a call, or a text, or anything but this? I sat on the edge of my bed, the box between my knees, and tried to steady my breathing. My fingers traced the creases in the paper, the places where it had been folded and refolded. I thought about calling Sam, but we hadn't spoken in months. Would they even answer? Would opening the box betray some last thread between us, or was this my only shot at closure? I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over Sam's name. No new messages. Just the same silence that had grown between us for years. I set the phone aside. The box waited, patient and inscrutable. I wanted to open it, I needed to. But I was afraid. Not of what was inside, exactly, but of what it might mean. What if it was something I'd forgotten, some secret I'd buried? What if it changed the story of our friendship in ways I couldn't fix? My hand shook. I pressed my forehead to the cool surface of the box, breathing in the scent of old cardboard and faded perfume. The room felt smaller, the air thick. I flashed back to graduation night, the way the world had felt huge and uncertain, the sky streaked with the last glow of sunset, everyone shouting and hugging and crying. The memory hit me like a wave. I was standing outside the gym, cap crooked, clutching my diploma. Sam found me in the dark, eyes shining with unshed tears. They pressed the box into my hands. "Promise me you won't open it until you're in college?" Sam whispered. Their voice was hoarse, desperate. "Why? What is it?" I asked, laughing, trying to make it light. "Just, promise." I nodded, tucking it into my backpack. Sam grabbed my arm, fingers digging in. "I mean it," they said. "You have to wait. You have to trust me." I frowned. "Sam, what's going on? Are you okay?" They hesitated. I need you to know something. But I can't say it yet." Their eyes darted away, jaw clenched. "Everything's about to change," they whispered, more to themselves than to me. I wanted to push, to demand answers. But the noise of the crowd swelled, someone called my name, and just like that, the moment broke. Sam let go. I shoved the box deeper into my bag, promising myself I'd ask later. But I never did. That night, after the parties, I got home and emptied my bag. The box was gone. I tore through my clothes, the bed, the car. Nothing. My heart pounded as I texted Sam, "Did you take the box back?" No reply. The next morning, Sam acted like nothing happened, like the box never existed. I tried to joke about it, but Sam just smiled, thin and strained. "Guess it wasn't meant to be," they said, voice flat. After that, we both pretended it didn't matter. But I never stopped wondering. What had Sam wanted to tell me? What secret was worth hiding in a box, then hiding the box itself? Why did it feel like the end of something, instead of a new beginning? Back in my apartment, the box sat between us, heavy with the weight of 4 years' silence. I stared at it, torn between fear and hope. Was this my chance to finally understand? Or was it better to let sleeping secrets lie? My phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. For a split second, I hoped it was Sam. It was just a school notification. The silence pressed in again, electric and alive. I glanced at the clock. I'd been sitting here nearly an hour. My chest ached. I thought about all the times I'd almost called Sam, all the texts I'd written and deleted. I thought about that last night, Sam's face in the dark, the words they couldn't say. What if the box held everything we never said? What if opening it was the only way forward? I ran my fingers along the seam, feeling the rough patch where the tape had split. My breath came fast and shallow. The world felt suspended, like the moment before a storm breaks. I closed my eyes, remembering the weight of Sam's hand on my arm, the tremble in their voice. Everything's about to change. And maybe, after all these years, it finally had. But first, I needed to decide, open the box, or let the past stay buried. My heart pounded as I reached for the ribbon, the world holding its breath right along with me. Mini cliffhanger. My hands hovered over the box, fingertips tingling like static. The tape felt stiff and brittle, as if it had aged along with all the unspoken things between Sam and me. I slid my thumb under the edge, heard the faint crackle of glue giving way, and for a second, I imagined the sound echoing all the way back to that night after graduation, the night everything changed. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, was Sam's old camcorder. The one we'd used for our senior project, covered in faded stickers and a strip of blue painter's tape with our names scrawled in marker. My breath caught. Next to it, a single Polaroid, the two of us sitting on the hood of my car, laughing so hard we looked unrecognizable. There was something else, too, a tightly folded letter, yellowed at the creases. The scent of worn paper and plastic drifted up as I unfolded the note. Sam's handwriting curled across the page, the words were shaky, like they'd been written in a rush. "You said you'd never forget me." I wanted to make sure, it started. The rest of the letter was an apology, but not for losing touch. For never telling me the truth about that night, the night the box vanished. Sam admitted they'd taken it back home after our argument, too afraid I'd open it and see the video inside. A secret, hidden inside a time capsule I'd never meant to bury. I powered on the camcorder, my thumb trembling. The old LCD flickered to life, and there we were, 4 years younger, recording a drunken confessional in the backseat of my Subaru. The audio was fuzzy but clear enough. Sam was talking, about starting over, about how scared they were to leave town, about how much they'd relied on me. Then, suddenly, Sam turned to the camera and said, "I have to tell you something, and I can't say it to your face." There was a pause, a shaky laugh, and then, "I think I'm in love with you. And I don't know what to do about it." My stomach twisted. I remembered the argument that night, how Sam had seemed on edge, how I'd brushed it off as nerves. I'd been so wrapped up in my own plans, my own excitement, that I hadn't noticed the way Sam looked at me. Not really. I set the camcorder down, my heart hammering, and fumbled for my phone. My fingers hovered over Sam's contact. I didn't know what I was going to say, if I should say anything at all. But I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. The line rang once. Twice. Then, Sam's voice, hesitant, older, but still undeniably Sam. "Hello?" "Hey," I said, my voice thin. "I got the box." There was a pause. I could hear Sam exhale, almost like they'd been holding their breath for years. "I wondered if you would," they said quietly. "I watched the video," I said. I could feel the words pressing down, the secret between us suddenly huge and heavy. Why didn't you ever tell me? Sam was silent for a long moment. I heard the faint hum of traffic in the background, a dog barking somewhere far away. I was scared, they said. I thought if I told you, I'd lose you. Then we argued, and it was easier to just pretend none of it happened. I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. Do you still? I started, but the words stuck. Sam let out a shaky laugh. I don't know. Maybe not in the same way. But I missed you. I just wanted you to know what you meant to me. What you still mean. We talked for a long time. About the past, about the fight, about our separate lives since. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, just two old friends, finally telling the truth. There were tears, and laughter, and long silences that felt almost comfortable. When we finally hung up, I sat back and looked at the camcorder, at the photo of us on my dashboard. The secret was out. The box was open. And the past didn't feel nearly as heavy as it had just an hour before. What I learned. That secret's way more than you think, and letting go, really letting go, means trusting someone enough to let them see you, even the messy, scared parts. I don't know what happens next for Sam and me, but for the first time in years, I feel like the story isn't over. It's just finally honest.
When my grandma passed away, she left me her old wooden music box, the one she never let anyone open while she was alive. Yesterday, while moving apartments, I finally opened it, and found a tiny camera lens hidden beneath the spinning ballerina. The box hasn't played music in years, yet the camera's light blinked red for a second before going dark. By the end, I learned who had really been watching, and why my grandma warned me never to wind the box fully. I grew up in my grandmother's house, a creaky two-story place that always smelled faintly of lavender and lemon polish. She was stern but kind, the sort of woman who ironed her bedsheets and folded grocery bags to reuse them. On her dresser sat that music box, polished oak, chipped at the edges, with a tiny brass key that looked far too delicate to turn. Whenever I reached for it, she'd swat my hand away. Not that one, she'd say, her voice soft but sharp. It's for listening, not for looking. As a kid, I thought she meant it was fragile. But once, when I was maybe 8, I noticed the bottom panel had 4 tiny screws. I asked her what was inside. She smiled without humor. Dust and old memories, she said. You don't want to wake either. That answer stuck with me, the way odd things from childhood do. I'd sneak glances at the box whenever the lullaby played, its tune slow, almost mournful, like someone remembering a song instead of singing it. When she passed last winter, the house went silent in a way that felt physical, like a heavy coat you couldn't take off. Sorting through her things, I found the box wrapped in a silk scarf, the scent of lavender still clinging to it. My brother said, "You keep it. You were her favorite." I didn't argue. I carried it home and set it on my bookshelf, meaning to wind it someday. Months passed. Life blurred, work, rent, the usual. The box became background decor until last week, when I started packing for a move across town. I remember the afternoon light slanting through half-closed blinds, dust floating like tiny ghosts. I picked the box up, and the ballerina inside wobbled on her spring. The wood felt warmer than I expected, almost like it had absorbed years of touch. I wound it once, gently. The song wheezed out, notes uneven, as if the gears were coughing up their last secret. Then I dropped it. It wasn't a big fall, just from the edge of a packing crate, but the lid snapped shut and something inside clinked. When I opened it again, the ballerina tilted to one side, and I saw a sliver of brass under the platform where she stood. I pressed it, expecting a spring. Instead, the whole base shifted a few millimeters, revealing a circular glass eye no bigger than a pea. I froze. At first, I thought it was a jewel, maybe some decorative piece. But when I tilted it toward the light, it reflected back in that unmistakable way, flat, dark, like a camera lens. My fingers went cold. "No way," I whispered. I turned the box over, searching for a battery compartment, a wire, anything. On the underside, beside the faded maker's stamp, was a tiny port that looked suspiciously like an old-style charging connector. I found a universal adapter in one of my drawers, left over from an old phone, and plugged it in just to see. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a faint red dot blinked once, like a tiny heartbeat, before fading to black. The hairs on my arms lifted. "Grandma," I said out loud, half laughing, half terrified, "what were you doing?" I sat there on the floor, surrounded by half-packed boxes, staring at that little red light. The logical part of me said it was a coincidence, maybe a motion sensor or some decorative gimmick. But another part, the one that remembered her warning not to open the bottom, whispered that maybe the box had been more than sentimental. I grabbed my phone and Googled the make of the music box. Nothing modern came up. The closest match was a model from the 1950s, long before digital anything. Which meant someone had modified it. I couldn't tell when or why. That thought gnawed at me until evening. By sunset, the apartment had turned into a maze of cardboard. The music box sat on the coffee table, its ballerina frozen mid-pirouette. I poured myself some coffee and called my brother. "Hey, weird question," I said. "Do you remember Grandma's music box?" "Sure," he said, distracted. "The creepy one you got stuck with?" "Yeah, I think it has a camera inside." He laughed. "Oh what? I'm serious. There's a lens, a light, everything. It blinked when I plugged it in." He made that low skeptical noise he always makes. "You've been watching too many mystery podcasts. Maybe it's just a reflection." "I know what a lens looks like," I said. "It's tiny, but it's there." "Then maybe she bought it secondhand." "Who cares? It's not like it's recording you now." That made me glance at the box again. The red light was dark, but I couldn't shake the feeling it was pretending to sleep. "I don't know," I said quietly. "It feels wrong." "Then toss it," he said. "Grandma's gone. Whatever that thing is, it's her problem, not yours." He hung up before I could argue. Typical. Night settled in, thick and humming. The streetlight outside cast a dull orange glow through my blinds, striping the walls like bars. I tried to keep packing, but every time I taped a box shut, I'd catch myself glancing back at that ballerina. Her painted eyes seemed to follow me. I told myself, just leave it. But curiosity is a kind of itch, you can't ignore it forever. Around midnight, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a screwdriver set. My apartment was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and the occasional groan of pipes. I turned the box over, tracing the screws my grandma had warned me about. "Sorry, Grandma," I whispered. "But you left me no choice." The first screw resisted, then gave a tiny squeal as it came loose. The second felt easier, almost like the box wanted to open. When the final screw dropped onto the rug, the bottom panel lifted with a sigh. Inside was a tangle of tiny gears, wires, and, yes, a miniature circuit board no bigger than a matchbook. Someone had gone to serious effort to hide it. My heart pounded. I reached in carefully, brushing away a bit of dust. The metal felt cold, sticky with age. There was a slot along one edge, the kind you'd find on an old camera, a space for a memory card. I tilted the box, and something slid free, catching the light before landing in my palm. It was a small, black micro SD card. For a moment, I just stared at it, the way you stare at something you don't yet understand but know could change everything. My fingertips tingled. Whatever was on that card might explain the lens, the blinking light, the warnings. But it also meant someone, maybe my grandmother, maybe not, had been filming something. Or someone. I set the card on the table beside the unplugged box. The ballerina leaned toward it, frozen in her eternal twirl, like she was pointing at my next mistake. That's when I heard a soft click from inside the box, even though it wasn't wound. The same slow rhythm that usually preceded the lullaby. 1, 2, like a heartbeat returning after a long pause. I flinched and looked closer. The ballerina hadn't moved, but the faintest whiff of lavender drifted up, fresh, as if someone invisible had just opened a drawer of her perfume. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "You okay?" I typed back, "I found something else." Then I looked at the little memory card again. It felt heavier than plastic should. I knew I should wait until morning, maybe show it to someone, but the question burned too hot. What had my grandmother been recording? And why hide it in the one thing she told me never to touch? I picked up the card, turning it between my fingers. That's when a second, quieter sound came from the box, a faint static crackle, almost like a whisper escaping through the gears. I froze mid-breath, the card pinched between my thumb and forefinger. Whatever secret my grandmother had locked inside that music box wasn't finished playing yet. I sat at my kitchen table with the music box between my elbows, the wood still smelling faintly of cedar and dust. My laptop hummed beside it, lid open, cursor blinking like it was impatient with me. The tiny memory card I'd pried from under the spinning ballerina rested in my palm, warm from my skin. I kept asking myself if I really wanted to look. Once I saw what was on it, I couldn't unsee it. But curiosity always wins with me, it's a bad habit. I slid the card into the reader, and the screen filled with a list of dates going back almost 20 years. The first file opened into static gray shapes, like snow on an old TV. I turned up the volume. The faint tick of my wall clock overlapped with another ticking sound from the video, then the static cleared. The camera had been pointed at a familiar corner, Grandma's living room. I recognized the faded wallpaper with its pink vines, the crocheted blanket draped over the arm of her recliner. The ballerina's stand was visible in the corner of the shot, unmoving. Everything felt still, so still that my own breath sounded too loud. A chair creaked on the recording. Someone moved in front of the lens, a blur of motion, dark hair, a hand reaching toward the box. Then came voices, low and sharp, though the microphone warped them like they were underwater. "Just keep it secret," a woman's voice hissed. "She doesn't need to know." My stomach tightened. I knew that voice. I'd heard it on birthdays, scolding me for being late. It was my mother. "Mom?" I whispered at the screen, as if it could answer. Another voice answered her in the video, lower, a man's maybe, though I couldn't make out words. Then my mother again. "We agreed. If she finds out, it's over." The recording cut to static. My laptop fan roared like it couldn't handle what it had just processed. I sat back, heart knocking against my ribs. What could they have been keeping secret? And who was she? Grandma? I scrubbed back through the clip, rewound the sound, listened again. The whisper was clearer on the second pass. "Keep it secret from her." From Mom. The way she said, "Mom," it wasn't my grandma she was hiding from, it was her mother. My great-grandmother had died decades before I was born. So this conversation had to be old, maybe recorded before I was even born. I closed the laptop halfway and stared at my reflection in the darkened screen. My face looked pale, distorted, like the camera was still on me somehow. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that phrase, "Keep it secret," from her. From Mom. The next morning, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. "Sweetheart, you okay?" "I found something in Grandma's music box," I said. "A camera. And videos." The pause on the other end lasted too long. Then she forced a laugh. "Oh, that old thing? Probably just a toy your grandfather tinkered with. You know how he was." "Mom," I said quietly. "I heard your voice." Her breathing changed. "My voice?" "In the recording. You were talking to someone about keeping something secret." From her. Silence. I could hear the faint rustle of her hand covering the receiver, maybe pacing. Then, that must have been, "Oh, honey, that must have been a joke or something." You know how old tapes can distort sound. It wasn't a tape. It was a digital file. From the camera inside the box. Another pause. "You shouldn't be messing with that," she said, her tone tightening. "Your grandmother was private. She wouldn't like you digging around. She's gone, Mom, and she left it to me. Don't you think that means she wanted me to know what's in it?" A breath. Then, softly, "Come by the house. We'll talk." When I arrived, she was waiting in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. The morning light slanted through the blinds, striping her face. She looked smaller than I remembered, like the air had gone out of her. "Your grandfather built that box," she started before I could even sit. "He was obsessed with documenting everything, every birthday, every conversation. He thought he was preserving history. Then why hide the camera?" She shrugged, eyes flicking toward the window. "He said people act differently when they know they're being watched. Maybe he wanted authenticity." "And the recording of you?" I asked. "The whispering?" Her fingers tightened on the mug. "I don't remember that." Then, quieter, "Maybe I don't want to. But you knew about the camera." "I knew he liked to tinker. That's all." I watched her for a long moment. The air smelled faintly of lemons and something burnt. "You're lying," I said finally. Her eyes snapped to mine, glassy and wet. "Some things," she said, "should stay buried." A shiver ran through me. "What did you do, Mom?" She stood, chair scraping the tile. "Enough. I'm not talking about this." I left before she could say more. As I stepped outside, the wind carried a faint whiff of lilac from the bushes Grandma used to trim herself. I thought I heard the faintest note of the music box's tune in my head, like a memory looping. Back home, I stared at the box again. The ballerina leaned slightly to one side, like she was listening. I turned it over in my hands, running my thumb along the carved rose on the lid, and felt something rough beneath the hinge. Tape. I fetched a small knife, slid it under the edge, and peeled away a thin strip of electrical tape. There, hidden flat against the wood, was another memory card, smaller than the first, almost invisible. My pulse quickened. I slipped it into the laptop. This time, the video opened instantly. The image was clearer, newer. My grandmother's face filled the frame. She looked younger than I remembered, maybe in her 50s, but her eyes were the same calm gray blue. She sat in the same living room, the music box on the table before her. "If you're watching this," she said, voice steady but low, "something went wrong." I froze the video. My mouth went dry. The room around me felt suddenly too quiet, like even the fridge had stopped humming. I pressed play again. "I never wanted to involve anyone," she said. "But if you found this, it means the truth hasn't come out." She leaned closer to the camera. "Be careful who you trust." Then the clip ended. I stared at the blank screen. My hands were trembling. "Be careful who you trust." I couldn't stop hearing it. I searched the cards directory. There were more videos. 10 of them, each labeled only with dates. My cursor hovered over the next one. When it opened, Grandma appeared again, this time sitting beside a pile of envelopes and an old ledger. I thought it was just small amounts, she said. A few bills missing from the drawer. But it kept happening. She looked off camera, her mouth tightening. So I decided to set a trap. She turned the music box toward the lens. I installed this camera, told everyone it was broken. I wanted to see who would take what wasn't theirs. The next clip jumped to a new date. The lighting was dimmer. Grandma's voice cracked a little. It wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the maid. It wasn't the neighbor boy. It was family. I sat forward, heart pounding. The money, she said, wasn't about greed. It was about something larger. Something my late husband kept from me. He left behind accounts I never knew existed. Someone found out. Someone I trusted. Her eyes flicked toward the door in the video, like she'd heard something. Then she whispered, I can't forgive her. The clip ended abruptly. I clicked on another. This time, the camera pointed at a stack of papers. A handwritten note filled the frame. The ink was shaky but legible. At the bottom, circled twice, was a name. My mother's. I stopped breathing. My throat tightened, a cold weight settling in my chest. I scrolled through the next video, another angle, more of Grandma talking through tears. I'll keep this as proof, she said. If she ever denies it, I'll have the recording. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the apartment. My reflection stared back at me again, pale and stunned. Proof. Denial. Betrayal. The words spun in my head like static. I needed answers. When I reached my mother's house again, she was in the garden, pruning the roses. The air smelled of soil and rain. She looked up, startled by the crunch of my shoes on the gravel. You found more, didn't you? She said softly. I didn't answer. I just held up the memory card. She sighed, setting down her shears. I hoped you wouldn't. What did Grandma mean? I asked. She said she couldn't forgive you. She said you took something. Her shoulders hunched. Your grandmother had a way of seeing only what she wanted to see. That's not an answer. She looked at me, eyes rimmed red. You wouldn't understand. Try me. A long silence stretched between us. The garden buzzed with bees, louder than either of us. Finally she said, I was drowning, all right? Your father had left. I had debts I couldn't pay. Grandma sat on money she never used, money she didn't even know she had. I told myself I'd pay it back. So you stole from her. She flinched. I borrowed. She caught you on camera. I know, she whispered. She confronted me. I told her everything, and she said nothing. Just turned on that damn box and let it record. She said if I ever lied about it, she'd have proof. And the inheritance? I asked. The accounts she mentioned? Her expression changed, a flicker of guilt and something else, relief, maybe. She changed her will, left the house to you. I think she wanted you to find those recordings one day. Her way of passing judgment. I felt dizzy. So she wanted me to know what you did. She wanted me to live with it. Every time I saw that music box on her shelf, I remembered. I looked at her hands, still streaked with soil. You could have told me. What good would that do? She said. It wouldn't bring her back. The wind picked up, scattering rose petals across the path. One landed on my shoe, soft and damp. The smell of earth grew stronger, almost metallic. She forgave you enough to keep it secret, I said. She could have told everyone. She didn't forgive me, Mom said. She punished me. Quietly. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who raised me with the person in the videos. And now you're punishing me by lying. Her face crumpled. I wasn't lying to you. I was protecting you. From what? From thinking your family was built on betrayal. I laughed, but it came out hollow. Too late. She stepped forward, reaching for me, but I pulled back. The air between us felt heavy, full of things unsaid. For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of the lilacs and the faint creak of the gate in the wind. Take the house, she said finally. Take the box. Maybe you can make peace with it. I never could. When I got home that night, I set the music box on the table again. The ballerina caught the light from the window, her chipped paint gleaming faintly. I wound the key once, halfway, just to hear it. The melody stumbled, slow and uneven, but familiar. I imagined Grandma listening from somewhere, waiting. As the song faded, I opened the lid one last time. The inside looked ordinary, velvet lining, a small compartment for jewelry. But I knew better now. Every inch of it was layered with secrets. I took a deep breath, slid the first memory card back into its slot, and pressed play on the laptop again. Grandma's voice filled the room, calm, steady, unshakable. If you're watching this, she said, you already know the worst of it. But remember, the truth, once uncovered, belongs to the living. What you do with it is yours alone. Her words lingered in the air long after the screen went dark. I sat there, the music box ticking softly beside me, and wondered what she'd expect me to do next. Because somewhere in all that silence, I could swear I heard the faint click of the camera turning back on. I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, my laptop open in front of me, the music box sitting like a quiet witness beside it. The files I'd recovered filled the screen, hours of grainy footage, decades of secrets. I'd already watched enough to know the truth. My mother had used the hidden camera to keep tabs on my grandmother after her memory started to fade. It wasn't malicious at first. It looked like concern. But the later videos told a different story: arguments, hidden tears, a desperation that made me sick to my stomach. The air in my apartment felt heavy, like the walls themselves were waiting for me to choose. The cursor hovered over a folder labeled Final. I clicked, and there she was, my grandmother, sitting in her old floral chair, the music box open beside her. Her eyes, soft but clear, stared right into the lens. "If you're watching this," she said, voice trembling with age, "then the box found its way to you. Maybe I'm gone now, that's all right." I froze. Her voice filled the room, warm and fragile. "I know what your mother did," she continued. "I forgave her long ago. She was afraid of losing me, the same way I was afraid of losing her." She sighed, adjusting her shawl. "Forgiveness is worth more than any fortune. Don't let this box turn into a curse." Her words hit me like a wave I didn't see coming. I paused the video and rubbed my eyes. The moral choice sat square in front of me. Expose my mother's secret, maybe even destroy what was left of our family, or delete everything and let the truth die with Grandma. I heard the hum of the refrigerator behind me, the soft ticking of the clock. Ordinary sounds, but they suddenly felt amplified, like the world was holding its breath. I called my mother. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Hey," she said, cautious. "I found something in Grandma's music box," I said. Silence. Then a long exhale. "The camera? Yeah, I know everything, Mom." Another pause. I could hear birds outside her window, a faint breeze. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she said quietly. She kept wandering off. I thought if I could just watch over her, I could keep her safe. "She knew," I said. "She forgave you." Mom didn't respond at first. Then her voice cracked. "I don't deserve that. None of us really do," I said, surprising myself. But she was right. Holding on to guilt doesn't fix anything. We stayed on the phone for a while, not saying much, just breathing. When I hung up, I looked back at the laptop screen. The video had ended, frozen on Grandma's face, peaceful, smiling faintly. I plugged in an external drive, hesitated, then stopped. Did I really want to keep these files? Did anyone? The rational part of me said yes, proof, evidence, history. But the part of me that still heard my grandmother's lullaby in my dreams said no. Let it rest. I took a deep breath and selected all the folders. My finger hovered over the delete key. The sound of the city drifted in through the open window, distant traffic, a dog barking, someone laughing. Life going on, indifferent to my decision. I pressed delete. The computer screen blinked, the progress bar crept forward, and just like that, years of secrets vanished. I sat back and watched the empty folder. My chest felt strange, lighter, but raw, like I'd just confessed something I didn't know I'd been carrying. Then I noticed one file still sitting there. A single image, a still frame from the video. Grandma sitting beside the music box, smiling, her eyes crinkled with joy. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. So I saved the photo to my phone, printed a small copy, and slid it into the frame that used to hold an old concert ticket. It fit perfectly, like it belonged there. By the time the sun started dipping below the buildings, my apartment was mostly packed. Cardboard towers lined the walls, each labeled in my messy handwriting. The music box sat alone on the windowsill, light glinting off its lacquered surface. I picked it up, feeling the smooth wood under my fingertips. The winding key still had a faint resistance to it, like it remembered being turned too far. "Thanks, Grandma," I whispered. I set it inside the last box, cushioned between sweaters. Then I closed the flaps, taped them shut, and pulled the lights off one by one. The apartment fell into a soft darkness, broken only by the glow of the city outside. That's when I heard it. A faint, chiming melody. I froze, my heart thudding. It was the lullaby, the same one that hadn't played in years, the one Grandma used to hum while she brushed my hair. The music box was closed, sealed inside a cardboard box with no batteries, no power source. Yet the tune drifted out, delicate and slow, curling through the air like a whisper from another time. I knelt beside the box, pressing my ear close. The melody grew clearer, almost tender, as if the ballerina inside was spinning again, unseen. "Okay," I said softly, smiling despite the tears in my eyes. "I get it." For a moment I just listened. The notes carried warmth instead of fear now. They didn't feel like surveillance or secrets. They felt like love, messy, imperfect, but still love. The song faded after a minute, leaving the room quiet again. I didn't open the box to check. I didn't need to. Some things are better left unexplained. When I finally stood up, the night air from the window brushed my face, cool and faintly scented with rain. I could almost imagine Grandma sitting beside me, her hand on my shoulder, humming that tune. I whispered, "I forgive you too." The clock on the wall ticked steadily, no longer ominous. Just time moving forward. I took one last look around the apartment, then turned off the light and walked out, the faint echo of the lullaby still lingering in my mind. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace. Not the kind that comes from forgetting, but the kind that comes from understanding. In the lobby, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo again. Grandma smiling beside the music box. For the first time, she looked like she was at ease, as if she'd been waiting for me to see her this way, not as a mystery to solve, but as a person who'd loved deeply, made mistakes, and wanted me to do better. Outside, the moving truck idled at the curb. The driver waved. I lifted the last box into the back, shut the door, and climbed into the passenger seat. As we pulled away, I looked up at the apartment window. For a split second, I thought I saw a faint glow flicker behind the curtains, red and soft like a heartbeat. Then it was gone. Maybe it was the reflection of a passing car. Maybe not. Either way, I smiled. Because for once, I didn't need an answer.
Last summer, I found an old, locked toolbox in the back of my dad's garage while helping clear out some clutter after he moved to a smaller place. Yesterday, my dad called me in a panic, begging me not to open it, right after I'd finally managed to pick the lock. He's never been secretive before, so why the desperate warning now, and what could be so important inside a dusty, forgotten box? I'll tell you everything I discovered, and why my relationship with my family might never be the same again. It started out as just another one of those weekends where you think you're going to be home by noon, but end up with dust in your hair and a sore back instead. My dad had just downsized to a townhouse, and his new garage barely fit his car, let alone 3 decades of might-need-it-someday clutter. So, I volunteered to help sort through the mess, partly because I owed him for all the times he'd bailed me out, and partly because, well, we actually got along, awkward silences and all. I remember stepping into that garage and getting hit by the smell of old motor oil and cedar shavings. Dad was already there, sleeves rolled up, sorting a pile of tangled extension cords. "Glad you made it," he said, giving me a lopsided smile. His hands were already smudged with grease. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied, though my voice echoed a little too much in the mostly empty space. There was always this push and pull between us, a real closeness, but also these gaps where words would just kind of fall away. We worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the scrape of boxes against the concrete and the occasional clink of tools. The mid-morning sunlight slanted through the grimy window, making dust motes dance in the beams. I started on the back shelves, digging through half-empty paint cans and brittle garden gloves. That's when I saw it, a heavy, battered metal toolbox wedged way behind some old camping gear. The thing looked ancient, the red paint faded to a rusty pink, and a thick padlock sealing it shut. "Hey Dad, what's this?" I called, pulling it out and setting it on the workbench. It thudded down with an unexpected weight. He looked over, and for a second, his whole body seemed to stiffen. "Oh, that old thing," he said, trying for casual, but his eyes didn't quite meet mine. "Yeah, it's locked." "Got the key?" I asked, brushing dust from the lid. My fingers tingled with curiosity. He shook his head, a little too quickly. "Nah, it's just junk. Probably some old screws and nails. You can toss it if you want." He turned away, busying himself with a box of mismatched sockets. Something about the way he said it felt off. I watched him for a moment, and that's when I noticed his hand, a subtle tremor, barely there, as he sorted through his tools. My dad's always been steady, the type to fix a leaky faucet at midnight without so much as a sigh. Seeing him falter, even for a second, sent a weird chill up my spine. "Are you sure?" I pressed, running my hand along the cold metal. "Because it's pretty heavy. Feels like more than nails." He let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "Trust me, nothing good's in there. Just leave it." He changed the subject so fast, asking me about my job, my plans for the weekend, that I almost missed how his voice caught on the word nothing. But I couldn't let it go. I glanced at him, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the tools in his hand, and realized he wasn't just being forgetful. He was hiding something. The kind of something that makes a man's hand shake when he thinks no one's looking. I decided then and there, I wasn't tossing that box. Not yet. There was a story locked inside, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to know it. But I had to. And that's where things started to get strange. When I got home that night, the toolbox felt heavier than it had in the garage. Not physically, though it was a solid, battered old thing, but emotionally. I set it on my kitchen table, its dented corners scraping against the wood, and just stared at it. My dad's voice echoed in my head from earlier that day when we'd loaded boxes into my trunk. He'd been so casual then, joking about my pack rat jeans. There was absolutely nothing in his tone to suggest that this one forgotten toolbox would send him into a panic. But now, with the apartment quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and my fridge cycling on and off, I couldn't shake the feeling that this box was a puzzle I was supposed to solve. I ran my fingers over the cool, pitted metal, tracing the nameplate, Fisher, stamped right into the steel, probably from before I was born. The lock was a chunky, old-school padlock, the kind you'd see in a hardware store from the 80s. No key, of course. Dad hadn't handed me one, and I sure hadn't found anything that fit when I'd rummaged through the rest of his stuff. I tried every spare key I owned, even the tiny one from my old bike lock, just in case there was some trick. I could smell the faint scent of oil and dust, mixed with something older, metallic, a tang that lingered on my hands after I touched the box. Nothing worked. The lock just clunked at me, stubborn and cold. It was like the universe was daring me to give up, but the longer I stared, the more I started to wonder, what could possibly be inside this thing that would make my dad, of all people, freak out? I googled how to pick a lock on my phone, propping it up against a coffee mug. There were YouTube tutorials, diagrams, even entire forums devoted to people obsessed with opening locks. I found a bobby pin in my bathroom drawer and bent it into shape, then grabbed a paperclip. The TV played in the background, but I tuned it out, hyper-focused on the feel of the lock, tiny movements, the click of metal against metal, my heart pounding every time I thought I felt it shift. At one point, my neighbor knocked on the wall. I must have been making more noise than I realized. I called out, sorry, and went back to work, sweat prickling along my hairline. The apartment smelled like stress and old metal now. It took hours, long enough that my hands started to cramp. I was about to give up when, suddenly, the lock gave a tiny, almost imperceptible click. My breath caught. I twisted the shank, and the padlock popped open with a stubborn snap. I stared at it in disbelief, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off a magic trick. I'd done it. I actually picked the lock. That's when my phone rang, sharp and jarring against the hush of my apartment. I glanced at the screen, Dad. The timing was so uncanny that I froze, the padlock dangling from my fingers. For a second, I wondered if he somehow knew what I'd just done. I answered. Hey, Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't bother with pleasantries. Did you open it? His voice was tight, almost frantic. I hesitated, glancing at the box. I just got the lock off. What's going on? There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, shaky and uneven. Don't open it. Please, he said. Just bring it back. Tonight, if you can. Don't look inside. My stomach dropped. Why? Dad, what's in it? I asked, my voice trembling. He sounded desperate, almost scared. It's not for you. You have to trust me on this, okay? Bring it back. Right now. In the silence that followed, I heard a faint sound, maybe the TV at his place, maybe just static on the line. I could picture him sitting in his new, too small living room, hands pressed to his temples. Dad, you're scaring me. What's in the box? I pressed. He wouldn't answer. Just bring it back, he repeated, voice breaking. Then he hung up. I sat there with the open padlock in my hand, my heart hammering in my chest. Everything in me wanted to do what he said. But there was something about his voice, something beyond just embarrassment or regret. It was fear. And if my dad was afraid, I needed to know why. I stared at the box for a long time, the weight of the padlock in my palm. Finally, I set the phone aside and flipped open the lid. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell, old paper and something faintly floral, like dried perfume. There was a thick stack of photographs, edges curled and yellowed with age, bundled with a rubber band that had turned brittle and snapped as soon as I picked it up. Beneath that, a folded, faded envelope, its corners soft from being handled too many times. And sitting at the very bottom, a small, ornate key, brass, with a pattern etched into the bow that I didn't recognize. I reached for the photos first. My hand shook a little as I thumbed through them. The first few were of my dad, unmistakably younger, maybe late 20s, his hair longer, smile crooked in a way I'd never seen. His arm was around a woman I didn't recognize. She was laughing, her head thrown back, dark hair spilling over her shoulders. They looked happy. Not just posing for the camera happy. Something deeper. There were shots of them at a lake, sitting on the hood of a car, even one where they were dressed up, maybe for some fancy event. I stared at the woman's face, trying to place her. Was she a family friend from before I was born? An old girlfriend my dad had never mentioned? Something about the way he looked at her made my stomach twist. I tried to imagine my dad that young, that carefree, but it was like looking at a stranger. I set the photos aside, hands tingling, and picked up the envelope. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There was a name written on the front in looping script, Michael. My dad's name. I slid out the single sheet of paper, careful not to tear it. The writing inside was faded, almost smudged, but still legible. Dear Michael, it began. I hope you find this when you need it most. I know life has taken us in different directions, but I want you to remember the promise you made. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. The key is for you, always. There was no signature, just a single initial, R. I read it again, my mind racing. What promise? Who was R? Was this woman still out there, waiting for my dad to show up after all these years? My hands were shaking as I picked up the key, turning it over in my fingers. It was heavier than it looked, cool and smooth, with a tiny number stamped into the side, 113. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the letter and the key, just in case. The apartment felt suddenly colder, like someone had opened a window I couldn't see. I looked at the toolbox, the photos, the letter, and the key all laid out on my kitchen table. My life had felt so normal just hours ago. Now I was staring at a version of my dad I'd never known existed, and a secret that felt too big to carry alone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman's face, my dad's crooked grin, the mysterious R. I kept replaying his voice in my head, that desperate plea not to open the box. Why now? Why after all these years? The next morning, I drove to my dad's new apartment. The city was waking up, sunlight slanting through the trees, birds chattering from somewhere high above. My hands were cold on the steering wheel, the key in my pocket feeling like a stone. I buzzed his apartment, and he let me up without a word. The hallway smelled like coffee and old carpeting, and when I knocked, he opened the door almost immediately. He looked older than I remembered, hair grayer, eyes rimmed red like he hadn't slept. He glanced at the toolbox in my hands, then up at me. So you opened it, he said quietly. I nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Dad, what's going on? Who is she? I asked, holding out the stack of photos, my voice barely above a whisper. He took them with trembling fingers, and for a moment, he just stood there, staring down at the woman in the pictures. His face crumpled, not in anger, but in something like grief. She was my first love, he said at last, voice thick. Her name was Rachel. I waited, the breath caught in my throat. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of a dog barking somewhere down the hall. She gave me that key, he said, glancing at my hand. It opens a safety deposit box. I haven't seen it since before you were born. I blinked, confused. Why? What's in it? He shook his head, sinking down onto the worn sofa. I made her a promise. Before I met your mother, before any of this. I told her, if things ever changed, I'd come find her. And if I didn't, she said to hold on to the key. Just in case. He looked up at me then, eyes shining. I loved her. But life, it got complicated. I met your mom, we built a family, and I tried to forget. But I never could. That box, it's a piece of the life I almost had. I sat down next to him, the photos between us, the toolbox heavy on my lap. The room was filled with the soft ticking of the clock and the gentle hum of the fridge. I tried to picture my dad as a young man, torn between two worlds. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked quietly. He looked away. I wanted to. I didn't want you to think less of me. Or your mother. I swallowed hard. The key pressed into my palm, sharp and real. My dad's secret, Rachel, the promise, the safety deposit box, was suddenly my secret, too. And I realized, sitting there in his apartment, that opening the toolbox hadn't just changed how I saw my dad. It had changed everything about our family. But the biggest secret was still out there, waiting, whatever was inside that box, wherever Rachel was now. I looked at my father, uncertain but determined. We have to find out what's in that box, I said. He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. I know, he whispered. That was the moment I understood, nothing was ever going to be the same. The next morning, the air between my dad and me was heavy with everything unsaid. We barely spoke on the drive to the bank, just the hum of the engine and the faint tap of his fingers against the steering wheel. He looked smaller in the passenger seat, like he'd aged 5 years overnight. My heart pounded as we passed the brick storefronts and pulled into the parking lot, because I knew this was it, the real secret was inside that safety deposit box, not just the battered toolbox or the handful of letters I'd already found. Inside, the bank was chilly and quiet, the kind of place where even whispers feel too loud. The manager led us down a hallway lined with vault doors, and my dad's hands shook as he signed the paperwork. When the heavy door swung open, the metallic scent of cold steel filled the air. My dad reached into the box and pulled out a faded velvet pouch and a thick stack of yellowed envelopes, rubber banded together, edges worn. He held the pouch out to me, eyes shining with something like regret. "Go ahead," he said, voice rough. I opened it, and out slid an old engagement ring, delicate, with a pale blue stone, nothing like the ring my mom wears. My dad closed his eyes for a second. "Her name was Alice," he said quietly. "Before your mother. We were supposed to get married, but she died. There was an accident. I kept everything, her letters, the ring, locked away after I met your mom. I wanted a fresh start, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it all away." The letters had dates spanning 2 years before I was born. I flipped one open, careful not to tear the brittle paper. In Alice's looping script, there were stories about dreams, about the house they would buy, the kids they'd have. It felt like reading a ghost's diary, and I saw my dad's hands tremble as he watched me. "Why did you never tell us?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He took a deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling. "I was ashamed," he said. "Ashamed that I couldn't let go. I worried that if your mom knew, she'd think she was second choice. I didn't want you kids to think I was living in the past. I tried to bury it, but I guess I never really could." We sat there for a long moment, the only sound the distant whir of the vault's air system. I put my hand over his. "You don't have to hide anymore," I said. "Not from me." He squeezed my hand back, tears brimming in his eyes. Back at home, the silence was different. Lighter, but uncertain. We sat at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun slanting through the window, dust mote swirling. I turned the ring over in my palm, feeling its weight. My dad made us both tea, the clink of mugs breaking the stillness. "Do you think you'll tell Mom?" I asked. He stared into his cup. "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe she deserves to know who I really am. But I need to find the right way." I nodded, thinking about my siblings, about what this secret might mean for them. Would it change how they saw him? Or would it just add another layer to the complicated, messy love we all have for our parents? That night, as I lay in bed, the toolbox sat on my dresser, empty now except for the space where secrets used to live. I realized I saw my dad differently, not as a stranger, but as someone carrying invisible weights I'd never noticed. Maybe that's what family really is, learning to love each other, not in spite of the secrets, but through them. And maybe, I thought, some boxes are meant to be opened, not to air out the past, but to finally let it rest. I've wanted to impress my mom for as long as I can remember. She's the science teacher at my middle school, the one every kid hopes to get, strict but brilliant, and somehow manages to make Newton's laws sound like wizardry. At home, though, it's like she's got a different set of standards, especially when it comes to me. No matter how hard I tried, my baking soda volcanoes and potato batteries never quite passed muster. But this year, I was determined. The regional science fair was coming up, and I'd decided to build a homemade solar oven, something big, something I could be proud of. Maybe, finally, something Mom would be proud of, too. From the moment I scrawled solar oven in capital letters across my science notebook, I was obsessed. I spent hours after school watching YouTube tutorials, sketching blueprints, and scavenging for materials in the garage. My hands smelled like duct tape for weeks. The first prototype was a disaster. The pizza box lid wouldn't stay up, and I accidentally melted one of Dad's old CDs trying to reflect sunlight. Mom would walk by my room and peek in, sometimes pausing just long enough to ask, "How's it going?" But she never offered advice. It was weird, actually. Every other year, she'd been up to her elbows in my projects, coaching me on variables and safety goggles. This time, she kept her distance, almost like she was afraid of helping. I remember one night, hunched over on the kitchen floor, trying to glue aluminum foil to the inside of a cardboard box. The glue oozed over my fingers, cold and sticky, and the foil kept tearing in jagged lines. My little sister wandered in, wrinkling her nose. "That smells weird," she said. I laughed it off, but inside, I was frustrated. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted Mom to notice. A few days before the fair, I managed to get the oven to work, sort of. On a rare sunny afternoon, I dragged the contraption out to the backyard. I set a marshmallow inside, closed the lid, and waited. 30 minutes later, the marshmallow was sort of gooey, just barely melted. I hooped so loud the neighbor's dog started barking. That evening, I tried to show Mom my results, but she just nodded distractedly, flipping through lesson plans at the kitchen table. "Looks like you're making progress," she said, but her eyes didn't leave the stack of papers. The night before the fair, I could barely sleep. My room was a mess: cardboard scraps, rolls of tape, Sharpies without caps. I kept replaying my practice presentation in my head, trying to nail the explanation of how solar energy could cook food. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The floor creaked just outside my door. I thought maybe Mom would come in, wish me luck, maybe give me one last pep talk. Instead, the footsteps stopped, and after a long pause, I heard her quietly retreat to her own room. The house was eerily still. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and I listened to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Something felt off, like there was a secret hovering just out of sight. When I finally drifted off, it was with a knot of nerves in my stomach and a vague sense that tomorrow wouldn't go as planned. If I'd known what was waiting for me at the science fair, I might not have slept at all. I should have noticed something was wrong from the start: the way my mom hovered by the car, clutching her coffee tighter than usual, or how she kept glancing at my project box in the back seat like it was a ticking bomb. But I was so focused on not tripping over my own feet that morning, so fixated on the idea of finally showing her I was capable, that I missed every sign. The school gym was already buzzing with parents, teachers, and clusters of kids, all shuffling displays and plugging in extension cords. I could hear the slap of sneakers on polished wood and the squeak of folding tables being dragged into place. The air had that faint chemical tang, cleaner, sweat, and the sharp bite of poster glue. My stomach fluttered as I scanned for my spot. I kept picturing my solar oven, the one I'd built from pizza boxes and aluminum foil, the one that actually baked a cookie yesterday afternoon, sitting proudly beneath the bright lights. Except when I got there, my heart dropped. Someone had replaced my project. The table was laid out with a trifold board covered in glossy, perfectly cut graphs and 3D printed models of wind turbines. My name was lettered in crisp, blocky vinyl at the top: no marker smudges, no bent corners, not a single flaw. My stomach twisted. This wasn't my work. I stood there, staring. All the sounds in the gym faded into a dull roar as I tried to process what I was seeing. My hands hovered over the board, almost afraid to touch it, like it would bite me. "Hey, you okay?" A voice behind me startled me, and I spun around to see my mom, all smiles and teacherly calm. She set her coffee down next to a stack of handouts. "What happened to my project?" I tried to keep my voice low, but it came out shaky and thin. She glanced at the display like she couldn't imagine why I was upset. "I thought we agreed your solar oven wasn't quite ready, honey. So I helped a little." "A little?" My voice cracked, and I could feel people nearby start to look over. "Mom, this isn't mine. I didn't make this. Where's my oven?" She gave me that look, half patient, half warning, she uses on rowdy students. "We talked about this last night. You were so stressed, and I didn't want you to be disappointed if something went wrong. This project is solid. I just wanted to help." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. My hands were sweaty. I kept glancing around, worried someone would overhear, or worse, realize I was a fraud. I tried to keep my voice steady. "You switched my project without telling me? That's not helping. She put a hand on my shoulder. Her fingers felt cool, grounding, but I shook her off. "I promise, it's for the best. You can present this, and you'll do great." "I know you will." I stepped back, nearly bumping into a girl carrying a volcano model. My head buzzed with confusion and humiliation. The gym seemed to close in around me, all those other kids with their messy, honest projects, and here I was, standing next to something I'd never seen before. Then the worst possible thing happened. One of the judges, a tall woman with a clipboard and a sharp, curious smile, strode up to my table. "Hi. You must be Alex," she said. "Tell me about your project." I froze. My mind went blank. I could feel my mom's gaze drilling into the side of my head. I forced a smile and tried to sound like I belonged there. Yeah. It's about wind energy." And how, different blade shapes affect efficiency. I stumbled over the words, glancing desperately at the board for clues. The models gleamed under the gym lights, their little propellers spinning as the judge leaned in. She eyed me, flipping through her clipboard. That's interesting. Can you walk me through your experiment and what you learned? I swallowed. My mouth felt dry as sandpaper. Sure. So, I tested, 3 types of blades. I think. Using a fan? And I measured the voltage from each. The judge's eyebrows knit together. You think? I could feel the sweat trickling down my back. I tried to laugh it off, but it sounded strangled. It was a lot of data. I might mix up the numbers, but. Which material performed best, and why? She pressed. My eyes darted over the neat columns of data. I tried to piece together an answer. The, balsa wood? Because it was light. Less drag, maybe? The judge scribbled something. She didn't look convinced. I could see my mom in the corner of my eye, nodding along, mouthing silent words, urging me to keep going. Did you face any challenges during your experiment? The judge asked. I wanted to scream. I wanted to blurt out the truth, that I hadn't done any of this, that my real project was probably in a dumpster somewhere, covered in pizza grease and shattered dreams. But I couldn't. Not with everyone watching. Yeah, I managed finally. It was tough to keep the tests fair. Controlling for wind speed and, blade angles. The judge nodded, jotting more notes. Thank you, Alex. If you remember anything else, just let us know. Good luck. As soon as she moved on, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My knees felt weak. I glanced at my mom, who gave me a thumbs up, like this was just another school day. I couldn't take it. The gym felt too hot, too loud, too bright. I needed to find my solar oven. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I slipped away from my table, weaving between rows of projects, baking soda volcanoes erupting pink foam, a diorama of the water cycle complete with dangling blue beads, a potato battery setup blinking with tiny red lights. The smell of cardboard and markers mixed with the scent of cafeteria tater tots drifting in from the hallway. I ducked behind the bleachers, scanning for any sign of my oven. Nothing. Then I caught a snippet of conversation from 2 teachers chatting by the door. Couldn't believe she'd go that far for her own kid, one of them whispered. After what happened last year, I guess she's just being careful, the other replied. Their words made my heart pound. What happened last year? What was my mom hiding? I kept searching, pushing open the door to the storage closet. Dust motes danced in the pale slant of sunlight from a grimy window. There, shoved behind a stack of folding chairs and forgotten hula hoops, was my solar oven. The foil was dented, and one of the pizza box lids had come loose. My heart ached at the sight. I crouched down, running my fingers over the warped cardboard. A crumb of last night's cookie crumbled under my thumb. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Why would my mom do this to me? Why not just let me fail if that's what would happen? My eyes caught something else, a corner of a manila envelope sticking out of my mom's oversized bag, which she'd dropped in the rush to help set up. The bag was wedged behind the chairs, half concealed. The envelope had my name on it, handwritten in her careful, looping script. I hesitated, glancing toward the closet door. The gym sounds were muffled here, replaced by the faint hum of the old heating vent. I reached for the envelope, fingertips tingling. Just as I slid it free, footsteps thundered down the hallway. My best friend, Riley, burst in, out of breath and wide-eyed. Alex. You gotta come, now. The judges are asking for you. They're at your table, and your mom looks like she's about to lose it. The envelope trembled in my hands. I shoved it in my hoodie pocket, heart hammering, a million questions swirling in my head. I shot Riley a pleading look. Do you know what's going on? She shook her head, grabbing my sleeve. No, but your mom's freaking out. You have to get back before she does something even crazier. I hesitated, glancing down at the envelope. Should I read it now, risk everything, or go face the judges and keep pretending? My fingers tightened around the paper, the edges digging into my palm. Riley tugged me toward the door. If you don't hurry, they'll know something's up. Come on. With a final, shaky breath, I followed her out, the envelope burning a hole in my pocket, the truth so close I could almost taste it, but still just out of reach. The gym doors loomed ahead, the noise swelling as we drew closer. I had no idea what waited for me on the other side, but I knew nothing would ever be the same again. I found myself staring at my mom's neat handwriting on that folded sheet of paper she'd tucked into my backpack. All morning, the new project, a pristine model of a wind turbine, nothing like my lopsided solar oven, sat on the table, drawing glances from classmates. But it was the letter that had my heart pounding. My hand shook as I finally unfolded it behind the bleachers, away from the hum of nervous chatter and the squeak of sneakers on gym floor. Dear Mia, it started. You're probably confused and angry right now. Please let me explain. I could almost hear her voice, steady, gentle, but with a hint of fear. She wrote about her own science fair disaster in 8th grade, how her homemade volcano exploded in front of the judges, covering everyone in baking soda sludge. She'd been laughed at, she wrote, and the memory never really faded. I saw how hard you worked, she said, but I worried you'd be crushed if something went wrong. I just wanted you to have a shot at feeling proud. My breath caught. I remembered her hovering in the garage, offering advice I'd shrugged off. I pictured her after midnight, swapping my solar oven for the project she'd built without telling me. The letter ended with, I'm sorry if I've hurt you. I just wanted to protect you from disappointment, the way I wish someone had protected me. I pressed the letter to my chest. There was a metallic tang in the air from all the science gadgets, and the distant whir of a robot someone was testing. I felt like I was split in two, half furious, half aching for her. She'd crossed a line, but for reasons that weren't about winning or controlling me. They were about her own scars. I wiped my eyes and walked back into the gym, every step heavy. My mom was at the edge of the crowd, pretending to fuss with the turbine's display. When she saw me, her smile was too bright, too quick. Ready? She asked, voice tight. I wanted to yell. Instead, I whispered, why didn't you just tell me? She looked away. I thought you'd be mad. I am, I said, my throat thick. But I wish you'd trusted me. Even if I failed. The judges started making their rounds, clipboards in hand. My turn was coming. I could feel my classmates' eyes darting over, some whispering about the amazing wind turbine. I had a choice, present the project as mine, or tell the truth. I glanced at my mom. Her hands twisted together, knuckles white. In that moment, I realized she wasn't the unshakable scientist I'd always believed. She was just a mom, scared for her kid. But I also knew what I had to do. When the judges stopped in front of me, I swallowed hard. Actually, I said, my voice trembling, this isn't my project. My mom built it. I made a solar oven, but it's not here. There was a beat of silence, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. One judge raised an eyebrow. Thank you for your honesty. Could you tell us about your original project? I nodded, describing my solar oven, the failed batches, the burnt toast, the time I thought I'd finally gotten it right. My cheeks burned, but I kept going, hands moving as I explained. Afterward, I found my mom near the bleachers. She pulled me into a tight hug. I'm sorry, she whispered, voice breaking. I should have believed in you. We didn't win any ribbons. But as we walked out, the spring air sharp on my skin, I felt lighter. I'd stood up for myself and for the messy work that was mine. My mom and I talked for a long time that night, about her fears and mine. We promised to be braver, especially with each other. That day, I learned that honesty stings, but it heals too. And sometimes, loving someone means letting them risk disappointment, so they can find their own pride in the ashes.
10 years ago, I lost the diary I kept through high school, the one where I wrote everything I never said out loud, especially about the one person I hurt most. Yesterday, while checking on the apartment I rent out, I found that same diary on my tenant's nightstand, open, and with new entries written in my handwriting. The tenant swears they've never seen it before, but the latest entry describes something that happened in my life just last week. I teach English at the same high school I graduated from, a full circle I never planned. Most mornings start the same, coffee in a chipped mug that still smells faintly of cinnamon, a quiet drive past the lake, and the low hum of the heater that hasn't worked right since October. My life is small, predictable, and I've made peace with that. After everything that happened back then, peace felt like a luxury. 3 years ago, when my aunt passed, she left me her little duplex on the edge of town, beige siding, ivy creeping up one wall, a porch that moans when you step on the far right board. I keep one unit for myself and rent the other out. It's modest, but it pays the bills. My current tenant, Marina, moved in about 6 months ago. Early 20s, art student, mostly keeps to herself. She pays on time and waters the plants out front without being asked. We nod hello in the driveway, exchange polite smiles, the kind of neighborly rhythm that doesn't require much energy. That Saturday started like any other, grading essays, laundry humming in the background, my cat sprawled across the warm pile of towels. Then came the call. "Hi, this is Marina," she said. Her voice trembled just a little. "Sorry to bother you, but there's water dripping from the ceiling in the kitchen. I think a pipe's leaking." I told her I'd be right over. It wasn't the first time that old plumbing had caused trouble. Still, something in her tone made me uneasy, that sharp edge of panic under the politeness. When I got there, the smell hit first, damp drywall and the metallic tang of rust. The apartment looked tidy enough. A small couch, a stack of sketchbooks on the coffee table, the faint citrus scent of cleaning spray. Marina stood near the sink, wringing a dish towel in her hands. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and a streak of paint ran down her wrist like she'd been working on something before the leak started. "I think it's from upstairs," she said. "It started dripping about an hour ago." I climbed the step stool, pressed my hand against the ceiling, and felt the cold wetness seeping through. "Yeah, looks like a pipe joint. I'll shut off the water and see what I can do." She nodded, but she kept glancing toward the hallway like something else was bothering her. When I asked if she was okay, she just smiled too quickly. "Yeah, just stressed. Deadlines." The maintenance part was simple: turn a valve, tighten a fitting. But when I walked toward the bathroom to check the water pressure, I passed her bedroom door. It was half open. That's when I saw it. A small, navy blue notebook lying on the nightstand. The cover was scuffed on the corner, the elastic band stretched thin, familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. I hadn't seen that notebook since I was 17. I froze. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the steady drip from the kitchen and the faint hum of her space heater. My fingers itched to touch it, to prove it wasn't what it looked like. "Is everything okay?" Marina asked from behind me. I barely heard her. I stepped closer, the wooden floor creaking under my shoes, and looked down. The gold initials pressed into the bottom corner were mine, LAM, faded but unmistakable. I reached for it before I could stop myself. The leather felt warm, as if it had been handled recently. I flipped it open, just enough to see the handwriting. My handwriting. Loopy, slanted, the same way I used to write when I was trying to make my words look effortless. The first page I saw wasn't old. The ink was dark, fresh. The date at the top read 2 days ago. And the entry, it described the argument I'd had with my brother about selling our parents' house. Word for word, the same phrases I'd said in anger. I stumbled back. "What the hell?" Marina stepped closer, confusion clouding her face. "What's wrong?" "This," I said, holding up the diary. "Where did you get this?" She blinked. I don't know. "It's not mine." "It's mine," I said. "It went missing 10 years ago." Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. Then she shook her head. "I swear, I've never seen it before. It was just there when I woke up this morning." I studied her face. She looked genuinely terrified, not guilty, the kind of fear that comes from not understanding. But I couldn't make sense of it either. My heart thudded against my ribs as I flipped through the pages. The early ones were exactly as I remembered, the messy confessions of a teenager who thought heartbreak was the end of the world. But then came newer pages, dates from last month, last week. Each one described moments from my own life, things that had happened privately, things no one else could know. "How could you write this?" I asked. My voice cracked halfway through. "I didn't," she said. Her hands were trembling now. "I don't even own a pen like that." I looked down. The ink was the same brand I still used, dark green gel. The coincidence felt impossible. Then something odd happened. When I mentioned a name, Eli, she flinched. Just a tiny twitch, but it was there. "Why did you react like that?" I asked. "Like what?" She said too quickly. I didn't, but her eyes darted toward the window, and for a brief second, her expression softened into something like sorrow. "Marina, do you know him?" She shook her head. "No, I don't know anyone by that name." The silence stretched until the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. I could feel the weight of the diary in my hand, heavier than it had any right to be. Finally, I said, "I'm taking this with me." She didn't argue, just stepped aside, eyes wide, as if she was relieved to see it leave. Outside, the air smelled like rain and cold earth. I clutched the diary against my chest as I walked back to my place, my fingers numb from the chill. Every step echoed with questions I couldn't answer. How had it found its way here? Who was writing in it, or what? When I reached my front door, I hesitated before turning the key. The porch light flickered once, casting my shadow long across the boards. Inside, the house felt too quiet. I placed the diary on the kitchen table, next to my coffee mug, and stared at it like it might start writing on its own. I told myself I'd read only a few pages, just enough to understand. But deep down, I already knew this wouldn't end with understanding. It would end with remembering. And remembering was the one thing I'd spent 10 years trying not to do. When I got home that night, the diary sat on my kitchen table like it was waiting for me. The air smelled faintly of rain through the cracked window, and my hands trembled when I touched the worn leather cover. I'd told myself I'd only glance at it, just to make sure the handwriting really was mine, but the moment I opened it, I fell back into the world of my 17-year-old self. The pages were familiar and foreign at once. Blue ink that had faded to gray, loops of letters that used to feel like armor. I could almost smell the pencil shavings from my old desk, hear the late-night hum of my parents' refrigerator. I started reading from the earliest entries, the ones about Eli. Eli had been my best friend since middle school. We shared everything: music, secrets, the kind of inside jokes that can only survive adolescence. The diary reminded me of that night behind the gym, when I told a story that wasn't mine to tell, and it spread through school like wildfire. I wrote about how Eli stopped answering my messages, how I saw him across the cafeteria and he looked through me, like I was already a ghost. I turned the page, and that's when the air changed. The newer entries looked identical to my teenage handwriting, but the ink was darker, fresher. The date at the top was from 2 months ago. My stomach tightened. It said, asterisk, I saw Eli at the old bus stop again. He looked older, but the same sadness in his eyes. He didn't recognize me. The words blurred as I read them twice, 3 times. I whispered, that's impossible. My cat, Tilly, brushed against my ankle, her fur warm and grounding, but I still felt cold. No one else could have known about that bus stop. It was where Eli and I used to skip class, sharing fries and daydreams about leaving town. Another page. Asterisk, he never left. I think he's waiting for you to finish what you started. The penmanship was eerily precise, down to the way my lowercase g asterisk s looped back on themselves. I slammed the diary shut so hard that dust puffed from the edges. Okay, I said out loud, trying to steady my breathing. Okay, this is just some elaborate prank. But who would care enough to prank me about something no one else knew? I stared at the ceiling until the shadows shifted into dawn. By morning, I decided there was only one way to find out if any of it was true. I had to go back to where it began. Eli's old house stood at the end of Maple Street, half hidden behind overgrown lilacs. The porch sagged, and the paint peeled in strips like sunburned skin. When I pushed open the gate, it squealed in protest. Hello? I called. My voice sounded small. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of wet plaster. My flashlight beam caught on cobwebs and the faint shimmer of old wallpaper. Each step echoed up the staircase like a question. In what used to be Eli's room, I found boxes stacked against the wall. One of them had my name scrawled across the top in barely legible marker. My throat went dry. I knelt and opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, addressed to me, none of them ever mailed. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the words were careful, deliberate. Asterisk. I miss the way silence didn't scare us, asterisk, one letter said. Asterisk. I wish I'd told you I forgave you before I left. Another. Asterisk. If you ever find this, you'll know I, asterisk, and then the pen trailed off mid-stroke, the sentence unfinished. I whispered, you'll know you what? Wind rattled the window pane, and a loose shutter slammed against the siding. I flinched. The sound rolled through the empty rooms like someone walking upstairs. That's when I noticed something else. On the dresser, a faint dust-free rectangle, the size of a book. The diary could have rested there once. I pulled out my phone and called Marina, my tenant. She answered on the second ring. Marina, it's me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk about that diary. There was a pause. You went back to that place, didn't you? She said softly. How did you? I'll be home in an hour, she said. Wait for me. She hung up before I could ask more. By the time I got back to the apartment, the sun was low, painting the hallway orange. Marina was sitting at the kitchen table, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, the diary between us like evidence. I didn't lie, she said before I could speak. I really didn't know it was yours at first. Then how did you get it? She looked down at her hands. A thrift store, about 5 years ago. It was in a box of used books. I opened it, and, I don't know, I felt something, like it was calling me. That sounds crazy, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I know. She gave a small, sad smile. But I couldn't throw it away. Sometimes, when I was lonely, I'd read a few pages. And then one day, there were new entries. I thought I'd written them in my sleep, but the handwriting wasn't mine. I leaned closer. Why didn't you tell me when you moved in? Because I didn't understand it either. And because of Eli. The name hit me like a slap. You know about him? She hesitated, then nodded. He was my brother. The room tilted. No, that can't be. Eli never mentioned a sister. I was younger. He left when I was 12. I don't think he wanted you to know about me. He was protective. Her eyes glistened. When he disappeared, I found some of his things in a storage locker. That diary wasn't there, but I recognized your name. I think he wanted you to have it back. I sat down hard. The chair creaked beneath me. You said he disappeared. What do you mean? He went missing the same summer you lost the diary. No note, no trace. My parents thought he ran away. And you think the diary is connected? I don't just think it, she said quietly. I've seen it. It writes itself sometimes, when someone close to him is stuck, when they can't forgive themselves. I tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. So you're saying this thing is haunted by regret? Maybe not haunted, she said. Maybe it's just unfinished. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Outside, rain started to fall, tapping against the window. I need to see it happen, I said. I need proof. Marina nodded. Then keep it tonight. But whatever you do, don't close it if it starts to write. That night, I placed the diary on my nightstand. The house was still. Even Tilly had curled up in another room, as if she didn't want any part of this. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and electric. I meant to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled me under. When I opened my eyes again, it was 3:14 a.m. The moonlight spilled across the floor, pale and cold. The diary was open. My heart thudded. I sat up slowly. The pen I'd left beside it rolled toward the edge, as though nudged by an invisible hand. Words were appearing across the page, my handwriting, line after line, describing me sitting up in bed, watching the diary write. I could hear the faint scratch of the pen, though no one held it. I whispered, Eli? The pen paused mid-stroke, and the air seemed to hold its breath. Then the letters began again, but this time the style changed. The loops softened, the tilt different. It wasn't my teenage scrawl anymore. The final line formed slowly, like it wanted me to feel every stroke. Asterisk, you can forgive yourself now. I touched the ink. It was still wet, but cooling. The room felt lighter, as if something unseen had exhaled. I waited for more words, but the pen rolled to a stop. I whispered into the quiet, Eli, is that you? No answer. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator in the next room and the rhythmic tick of the clock. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I watched the ink dry, the message glowing faintly silver in the moonlight. By morning, the words had faded slightly, like they'd been absorbed into the paper. But the peace that settled in me, that stayed. Still, one thought kept pulsing in the back of my mind. If Eli had written to tell me to forgive myself, then where was he now? And more importantly, what else did the diary still have left to say? I drove to the apartment just after sunrise, the sky still bruised with leftover night. The streets were slick from a short rain, and the tires hummed low against the pavement. On the passenger seat sat the diary, wrapped in a faded scarf I'd found in the same box years ago, Eli's scarf. I didn't open it. I couldn't, not after what I'd read in the final entry 2 nights earlier. The words were mine, but they weren't. They felt like a voice trying to leave me gently. When I reached the building, the front gate was propped open. Marina was already waiting by the steps with a small suitcase beside her. She looked lighter somehow, as if the weight she'd carried in her eyes since the first day we met had finally decided to rest. You came, she said, smiling in that quiet, knowing way of hers. I said I would, I replied. My voice sounded thin, almost winded. You're really moving out? She nodded. It's time. I think he's done waiting. The way she said he made my stomach tighten. I didn't ask who. We both knew. Inside, her apartment was stripped bare except for the faint outlines where picture frames had hung. The air smelled faintly of lavender and dust. Sunlight poured through the window and caught on the particles drifting between us. It looked like time hanging still. I brought something, I said, unwrapping the scarf. The diary lay there, edges worn to velvet softness, its cover darker now, as if it had soaked in every secret we'd spilled into it. Marina's breath caught. You found it. I did, I said. And I think it's yours now. She reached out, fingers trembling, then stopped short of touching it. I shouldn't, it's yours. Maybe once, I told her. But not anymore. There was a silence so deep I could hear the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. She finally took the diary, cradling it like something fragile that could still bite. I read the last pages, I admitted. They weren't mine, but they felt like they were speaking to me. Marina looked up sharply. You saw the one about the window light? I nodded. Yeah, the morning light on the sill, the same one Eli used to sit under when he drew. Her eyes filled but she didn't cry. She only nodded, slow and steady, as if confirming a truth she'd already made peace with. I think he wanted you to know, she whispered. That he forgave you before you even asked. The sound of her voice was soft enough that it nearly vanished into the hum of the room. I had no words, only that dull ache behind my ribs that comes when forgiveness finally lands. She closed the diary and tied the scarf around it again. I'll take it home. My mom still keeps his things. Maybe she'll understand what this means. I smiled, though my throat burned. It belongs there. We carried her suitcase down together. The morning had brightened fully, and the wet pavement reflected the sky like liquid glass. A bus hissed to a stop across the street. "Will you be okay?" I asked. "I already am," she said, stepping into the light. "You will be too." She boarded without looking back, and somehow that felt exactly right. Watching the bus pull away, I realized I wasn't waiting for an answer anymore. The wind lifted, cool against my face, carrying the faint scent of rain and lavender. For the first time in years, I let myself breathe all the way in. 3 weeks passed before the letter came. No return address, just my name written in that same soft tilt I'd seen on the final diary page. The envelope smelled faintly of cedar and something faintly floral, lavender again, or maybe memory playing tricks. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time before opening it. The paper inside was thick, textured, like it had been torn from an old journal. "Thank you for remembering," it read. "For forgiving. For letting go." No signature. No hint of who had written it. But the handwriting. I knew it too well. It was mine, and yet not mine, exactly like before. Rounded in the places my letters were sharp, calm where mine tended to shake. I read it again and again until the words blurred. There was no fear this time, no need to rationalize. Just a deep, quiet certainty that whatever had been trapped between those pages was finally free. Outside, the afternoon light slanted through the blinds, striping the table in gold. Dust floated lazily in the air, catching on every tiny movement. I thought about how many hours I'd spent chasing proof of who was writing, proof of what was real, and realized none of it mattered now. I pulled a clean notebook from the shelf, one I'd bought years ago and never used. The cover still smelled like new paper and glue. I slipped the letter inside the front pocket, not to hide it, but to keep it close. For a moment I just sat there, pen in hand, listening to the rhythmic tick of the kitchen clock. Each second sounded like a heartbeat too patient to rush me. Then I started to write. Not to the past this time, not to ghosts or to guilt, but to the living. To Marina, maybe. To myself. To the version of Eli that still existed in the lines we'd drawn together. The first words came slow. Today the light on the windowsill was beautiful. Simple, almost nothing. But they were mine, truly mine, and that felt like a beginning. I wrote about the smell of rain on pavement, the way the city sounded when you stopped fighting it. I wrote about forgiveness not as something you earn, but as something that finally stops breaking you open. After a while, I realized the sun had shifted, painting the room in a late afternoon amber. Shadows stretched across the floor like calm water. The world felt startlingly ordinary, and that was the strangest part of all, how peace could look so plain. A small knock startled me. It was the mail carrier again, handing over a thin parcel addressed to Resident. Inside was a key, my old apartment key, the one I'd lost when Marina first moved in. No note this time, just the key resting on folded brown paper. I smiled without meaning to. Maybe she'd found it while packing up. Maybe not. Either way, it was back where it belonged. I hung it on the hook by the door, the metal clicking softly against the wall. That sound, simple, final, felt like a closing line. That night, before bed, I opened the window. The air was cool and clean, and the city murmured below, half asleep. Somewhere out there, a bus sighed to a stop. I imagined Marina stepping off, carrying the diary home, maybe placing it beside a framed drawing of Eli under the morning light. For the first time in years, I didn't wonder what words were waiting for me in that book. I only hoped they were good ones. I turned off the lamp, letting the soft blue of the streetlights fill the room. The notebook sat open on my desk, the letter tucked inside like a promise. I whispered goodnight, to Eli, to Marina, to the version of myself that had been afraid to remember, and felt something inside me answer, quiet but sure. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'll keep writing. But this time, I'll write to stay, not to hold on. And for once, that was enough. Approximately 1,160 words.
When I was 11, my dad forbade me from ever entering the tiny, locked room at the end of our upstairs hallway, no exceptions, no explanations. It wasn't just a rule, it was the rule. We could run in the sprinklers in our pajamas or eat cake for breakfast on our birthdays, but that door. Off limits, always. The brass knob was cold and untouched, and I'd feel its chill in my palm every time I dusted it, as if the room itself was reminding me I didn't belong. Dad's face would cloud over if I so much as looked at the door too long. "Don't even think about it," he'd warn, his voice dropping to that low, serious register that made my throat tighten. I remember one summer afternoon, the sun poking through the patterned glass, when I asked, "Why can't I go in there?" He just stared at me for a few seconds, then shook his head. "Some things are just for grown-ups," he said. That was the most I ever got. Still, the room shaped the rhythm of our family life. Every Saturday, Dad would disappear upstairs for an hour. We'd hear the key click, followed by muffled sounds, sometimes a scrape, sometimes a thud, before he came back down, acting like nothing happened. If I lingered in the hallway, he'd wait until I was gone. It was like living with a magician who never revealed his tricks. Dad was mostly a regular dad. He made pancakes with chocolate chips, fixed our bikes, even let us get a cat, despite being allergic. But there were cracks in the facade. Sometimes he'd drift off at the dinner table, staring past us like he was listening to someone else. Other times, he'd rush to hide a notebook or slip a letter into his jacket when the doorbell rang. One night, after I'd asked Mom about the room for the 10th time, she just sighed, running her fingers along the rim of her teacup. "It's nothing for kids," she said, not meeting my eyes. Then, a little too quickly, she changed the subject to my science project. I never saw her go near the locked door herself. If anything, she avoided it more than I did, steering the vacuum away, pretending it was just another part of the wall. Our family photos lined the hallway outside the room: birthdays, graduations, awkward holiday sweaters. But in every picture, if you looked close, Dad's eyes held something unreadable. Sometimes, at night, I'd lie awake listening to the old house creak, wondering what secrets could be big enough to need their own room. Everything changed last week. I was at work, sifting through emails, when my phone buzzed. It was Mom, her voice thin and shaky. "It's your father. He collapsed. They're taking him to the hospital." I barely remember the drive home, just the sound of my heart in my ears, the blur of headlights on wet pavement. The house was different without him. It felt colder, like the absence of his footsteps had sucked the warmth out of the walls. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, drifting through the air as I walked the familiar hallway. Every photo seemed to watch me, silently demanding answers I didn't have. I stood by the locked room, the forbidden door that had defined so much of my childhood. For the first time, there was no one to stop me. I pressed my ear against the wood, half expecting to hear something, anything, but all I heard was my own shaky breath. And then, as I turned to leave, my foot nudged something small and metallic on the floor. A key. Dad's key. Just lying there, as if it had been waiting for me all these years. My hand trembled as I picked it up, the metal warm from the sun. I stared at the door, the weight of a lifetime of questions pressing on my chest. What was Dad hiding? And was I ready to find out? That's when I realized, some doors are locked for a reason. But what happens when you open them anyway? The day after Dad collapsed at work, the house felt like it belonged to someone else. You know how you can walk through the same hallway 1,000 times, but one bad day and suddenly every shadow looks suspicious? That's exactly how it felt when I tiptoed past the kitchen to search his study for insurance documents. The air was heavy with the smell of old paper and the faint, clinical tang of hand sanitizer lingering from Mom's frantic cleaning spree. Every floorboard groaned, as if warning me, "This isn't your space, not really." I rifled through one of Dad's overflowing desk drawers, hands shaking, heart pounding like I was breaking a law. His handwriting, always so precise, glared at me from yellowed envelopes. Receipts, warranties, a faded Polaroid of me and him fishing, clutter, nothing useful. Then, wedged at the back, I found a small, battered tin. I popped it open, expecting coins or maybe a dead AA battery, but nestled inside, surrounded by silky blue ribbon, was a thick, old-fashioned skeleton key. My pulse stuttered. The metal was cold against my palm, but not unfamiliar. I'd seen this key before, dangling from Dad's watch chain when I was a kid. I sat down hard on the floor, cross-legged, the key digging into my palm. I didn't need to ask myself what it was for. There was only one locked door in our house, the one at the end of the upstairs hallway. The forbidden room. The room that, for my whole life, had been off limits, out of bounds, no exceptions. Dad's rule, the only rule he never joked about. I'd spent years making up stories about what was behind it, a treasure chest, a monster, maybe just a dusty pile of taxes. But now, with the key in my hand, all those childish guesses seemed hollow. Part of me wanted to drop the key back in the tin and slam the drawer shut. I could almost hear Dad's voice, stern but tired. "Some doors aren't meant to be opened, kiddo." But another part, louder, older, desperate, needed to know. I stood, the key clenched so tight it left a mark, and padded upstairs. Each step was a drumbeat in my chest. The hallway was dim, just a slant of afternoon sun leaking through the half-closed blinds. The locked room's door loomed at the end, painted the same dull beige as every other door, but somehow more ominous, as if it absorbed all the light. I reached out, touched the cold, pitted doorknob. I hesitated, thumb trembling over the keyhole. Was I about to betray my father, or finally understand him? I pressed my forehead against the door, breathing in the scent of old paint and dust. My hand was slick with sweat. My mind raced. What if I found something I couldn't unsee? What if this was a betrayal? But then I remembered Dad, lying in that hospital bed, pale and suddenly so mortal. If I didn't look now, I might never have another chance. I slid the key into the lock. It caught, then turned with a deep, echoing clunk. The sound sent a shiver through me, like breaking a spell. The door swung open with a reluctant groan. At first, all I saw was darkness. Dust motes danced in the strip of light at my feet. The air inside was cold, stale, and carried a faint scent, like old cologne and cedar, undercut with something sharper, almost chemical. I reached for the switch, fingers groping the wall until I found it. The bulb flickered to life, bathing everything in a sickly yellow glow. My breath caught. The walls were covered in photographs. Hundreds of them, curling with age, pinned in careful, geometric patterns. Some black and white, others faded Polaroids, snapshots of people I didn't recognize, laughing, hugging, mugging for the camera in parks, at parties, at what looked like a small-town parade. In the center of the back wall was a large, framed portrait of a woman with a gentle smile and dark, kind eyes. Below the photographs, shelves sagged under the weight of strange memorabilia, a battered baseball glove, a ceramic horse, stacks of yellowed playbills from off-Broadway theaters. There were boxes everywhere, neat, labeled in Dad's blocky handwriting. But the names weren't his. M. Turner, J. Langley, D. Evans. I froze, staring at one box labeled, 4S. I reached out, running my fingers over the dusty lid. The cardboard was soft, almost velvety, like it hadn't been touched in years. I felt like an intruder in a museum curated by someone I thought I knew. A sudden chill ran down my spine. Dad? I whispered, even though I knew he wasn't there. My voice barely stirred the silence. I pulled the 4S box off the shelf and sat cross-legged in the narrow patch of sunlight near the door. The cardboard creaked as I lifted the lid. Inside, I found envelopes tied with twine, a stack of journals with cracked leather covers, and a handful of objects that made no sense. A pressed flower, a tiny keychain shaped like a piano, a faded train ticket from a town I'd never heard of. I picked up one of the journals, hands shaking. The first page was addressed to Sarah. I frowned. Who was Sarah? The handwriting was Dad's, but looser, more hurried than I'd ever seen. I flipped through the pages, scanning snippets. Stories of late-night walks, inside jokes, trips to the movies. There were mentions of someone named Daniel, of holiday dinners I'd never attended, of a dog called Lucky. It read like a parallel life, a secret history running right alongside the one I'd always known. One envelope was heavier than the others. I untied the twine and slid out a stack of letters, each addressed to Sarah Turner. The return address was for a P.O. box I didn't recognize. The postmark was from nearly 20 years ago. I ran my thumb over a date, April 15, 2004. That was the year after I was born. I scanned the first lines. Dear Sarah, I hope you're well. I think of you every day. The rest blurred as my mind raced. Was Sarah a lost friend? A sister I'd never met? Or something else? I set the letters aside and rifled through the memorabilia. A theater program with Break a Leg, Love Dad, scrawled in the margin. A school photo of a girl with long brown hair and Dad's eyes. My heart thudded. Was this my sister? The air in the room seemed to crackle, suddenly electric. I tried to piece it together, but every new detail just made the picture stranger. Why had Dad hidden all this? Why the secrecy? Why the locked door and the rules? I couldn't sit with those questions alone. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice brittle and tired. Hey, honey, are you at the hospital? No, I'm home, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom, I found the key. I went into the room. There was a long silence, then a shaky sigh. I wondered when you'd find that. I'm sorry we never told you about it. Your father, he always thought it was safer that way. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my palm sweaty. Mom, who's Sarah Turner? Why are there all these pictures and letters? Mom's breath caught. For a moment I thought she might hang up. Then, finally, she spoke. Sarah was someone very important to your dad. Before you were born, before we even met, he had a different life. There was a lot of pain. Some things he never got over, but he never wanted you to carry that burden. I heard the clatter of dishes in the background, the muffled sound of the hospital intercom. Did you know about all this? I asked. I knew some, she said quietly. Not everything. There were things he kept to himself, things I only learned after we married. I always hoped he'd tell you himself one day. Maybe he was waiting for the right time, or maybe he was afraid. I stared at the portrait on the far wall, the woman with the gentle smile. Who is she? I asked. Mom hesitated, her voice barely more than a whisper. That's Sarah's mother. She died when Sarah was very young. Your dad tried to take care of her, but it was complicated. He lost touch with Sarah after a while. He always blamed himself. I sank back against the wall, the phone pressed to my cheek, the dust thick in my throat. So I have a sister? There was a long pause. You had a sister, Mom said, but she passed away a long time ago. Your father never really recovered. That room, it was his way of keeping her memory alive. He just couldn't let go. I closed my eyes, the weight of the secret pressing in. The smell of cedar and old paper felt suffocating now. All those years I'd tiptoed around the locked door, imagining monsters, and the real truth was so much sadder than anything I'd ever imagined. I hung up, tears stinging my eyes, and looked around at the scraps of a life I never knew existed. I pulled another box down, this one heavier, labeled J. Langley. Inside were more letters, more photographs, but these ones showed my dad, smiling with a group of people around a campfire, a guitar in his lap. On the back of one photo was a note, Summer, 97, the best days. I realized, slowly, that these weren't just mementos, they were proof of an entire, hidden chapter of my father's life. I pieced it together, bit by bit. The room wasn't just about a secret hobby or a lost friend. It was a memorial, a gallery of grief and memory, a place where my father kept his old self alive. The names on the boxes, Turner, Langley, Evans, were all people he'd loved and lost before I was ever born. Suddenly, I understood why Dad had locked that room. It wasn't about keeping me out. It was about keeping the past contained, somewhere safe, where it couldn't bleed into the present. But now, with him in the hospital and the key in my hand, the past was loose, and it was up to me to decide what to do with it. I reached for one last box, the smallest of them all, taped shut and labeled only with my name. My heart hammered as I peeled back the tape, wondering what other secrets Dad had left for me, and what they'd mean for both of us, now that the door was finally open. The next morning, I walked into the hospital with the weight of the little iron key pressing against my ribs. The air inside was sterile and cold, but my palms were clammy. Dad looked small in the bed, sunlight catching the stubble on his jaw. For a moment, I just watched his chest rise and fall, wondering how to even start this conversation. Finally, I sat down and placed the key on the white bedsheet between us. I went into the room. Dad, I said, voice barely above a whisper. The words hung there, suspended in the hum of the machines and the distant hallway chatter. He closed his eyes, and for a second, I thought he might pretend to sleep. But then he sighed, a sound that seemed to shake the whole bed. You always were too curious for your own good, he said, trying for a smile. It didn't quite land. I told him what I found, the photos, the letters, the other family, his other life. My throat felt tight, but I forced out every detail, even the part where I'd sat on the floor and cried. The steady beep of his heart monitor filled the silence between my sentences. Dad reached for my hand, his skin dry and papery. I never wanted to hurt you or your mom, he said. Back then, I thought I could keep everything separate, protect everyone. But secrets, they don't stay put. He started talking, really talking, in a way I'd never heard before. He told me about falling in love with someone else after my mom, about the guilt and shame, about the endless juggling of holidays, weekends, lies. His voice cracked as he explained how he'd tried to end things, but always got pulled back by promises and regrets. I asked him, did you ever want to tell us? He nodded, eyes shining. Every day, he said. But the longer it went, the harder it got. I was scared I'd lose you both. For a long minute, I just listened to the whir of the hospital ventilator and the distant rattle of a meal cart in the hall. I realized I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Later that week, after Dad's surgery, Mom and I sat together on the porch. The air was thick with the smell of cut grass and something sweeter, maybe honeysuckle. She was quieter than usual, her gaze fixed on the hydrangeas. I always wondered about that room, she said quietly, but I was afraid of what I'd find. We talked for hours, about trust, about the lies that pile up when people are scared, about how forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. There were tears, but also a strange, fragile kind of hope. I noticed that Mom squeezed my hand a little tighter when she spoke about starting over. Dad came home 2 weeks later. He was slower, thinner, but when he walked up the stairs, he paused outside the room. He looked at me, question in his eyes. It's okay, I said. Let's keep it open. We cleared out the old boxes together. Dust motes danced in the sunlight, and the room felt bigger than I remembered. We didn't throw everything away. Some things, like the letters, we agreed to keep, as a reminder. Now, when I pass the once locked door, it stands wide open. It's just a room, but it's also a promise that secrets, no matter how heavy, are easier to carry when you share them. And that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward, door unlocked, into whatever comes next.
2 years ago, I moved in with Mark, my seemingly ordinary roommate who claimed he was an only child and whose parents lived abroad. I was desperate for a place after my last lease fell through, and Mark's ad said, non-smoker, chill, like sci-fi, pays rent on time. He showed up to our first meeting with a box of donuts and a lopsided grin, and something about his easy, laid-back energy told me this would work. We bonded over late-night slices of greasy pizza, commiserating about how our bosses sucked and how subway delays seemed personal. If I'm honest, we didn't become best friends overnight, but we drifted into that comfortable zone where you can share memes in silence, or crash each other's Netflix queue without asking. Mark seemed like the perfect roommate, even if he kept his life squared away a little too neatly. He had a quirky sense of humor. He'd label his leftovers toxic, or leave punny notes on the fridge. But beneath the jokes, he was private. He never talked about his childhood. If I ever asked about his family, he'd just shrug and say, they're boring, trust me. Even when I tried to pry, like asking how he learned to play guitar or who taught him to cook, he'd steer the conversation away with a joke or a rant about the price of avocados. I figured everyone's got their boundaries, right? But every so often, I noticed things that didn't add up. Mark's room was always locked when he left for work, even if he was just running to the bodega for milk. Once, I borrowed his charger and spotted a drawer in his desk with a double lock. I joked, hiding state secrets in there? He grinned and said, "Just my collection of embarrassing poetry." He was always quick with a comeback, so I didn't push. Still, the oddities kept stacking up. Sometimes Mark would leave suddenly, phone pressed to his ear, muttering under his breath. He'd rush out without saying goodbye, and when he got back, he'd be quiet, tense, like he'd just run a marathon. He never let anyone visit, no friends, no parties, not even for birthdays. Once, I suggested a housewarming, and he just laughed, shaking his head. "Trust me, you don't want to see me socialize." It had an edge to it that I couldn't place. Then, one Saturday, I woke up to the buzz of Mark's phone vibrating nonstop on the kitchen counter. The screen was lit up with calls and texts, numbers I didn't recognize, no names, just strings of digits. I called out, "Hey, your phone's blowing up." He practically sprinted from his room, snatched it up, and ducked into the bathroom. I caught a flash of something in his eyes, panic. I remember thinking, maybe he's got a secret job, or a secret girlfriend. The mystery stuck with me, but when he came out, all smiles, he just said, "Spam calls." The universe hates me. It was around this time that Mark's girlfriend, Jess, started coming around more. Jess was quiet, polite, usually perched at the very edge of our beat-up couch like she was afraid to let her guard down. She had dark, curious eyes and a soft voice that always made our apartment feel a little too small. She and Mark rarely touched. Sometimes, when Mark left the room, I'd catch her staring at the pictures on our fridge, like she was searching for something. One night, Jess lingered in the kitchen, fiddling with her tea. She glanced at me and said, "Is Mark always like this?" I asked what she meant, pretending not to notice the strain in her voice. She hesitated, then said, "Just distant. Like he's hiding from something." I shrugged, trying to joke it away, and she added, almost whispering, "He says people deserve second chances, but you have to trust them first." I didn't know what to say to that, so I mumbled something about Mark being an enigma and changed the subject. But after that, I started listening a little closer, watching a little harder, every time Mark shut a door or left a conversation unfinished. Looking back, I should have realized something big was brewing beneath the surface. I just never expected it to knock on our front door, literally, late one stormy night, with a truth neither of us was ready for. The knock echoed in the apartment like a badly timed punchline. I remember the scent of takeout still hanging in the air, and the way Mark's girlfriend, Jess, was mid-laugh at some story when I opened the door. There she was, a tiny girl with midnight hair and wide brown eyes, hugging a battered backpack to her chest. She couldn't have been older than 6, but her voice was sure when she said, "I'm here to see my dad." And she looked straight at me. For a split second, I didn't even register she was talking about me. But her small hand extended, offering a crumpled slip of paper with my name scrawled across it. The room froze, Jess with her mouth half open, Mark stiff as a mannequin. I'm not proud to admit my first thought was, who's pranking me, because this was just too surreal. A cold sweat prickled under my shirt as I knelt down to her level. "Ah, I think you've got the wrong guy," I said gently. Maya's lower lip quivered, and she clutched my sleeve. "No, the note says you're my daddy now." I waited like Mommy said. I looked up as Jess's eyes darted between me and Mark, suspicion brewing in her furrowed brow. Mark's hand went to his forehead like he was bracing for impact, then he reached for Maya's shoulder. "Sweetie, maybe you're confused. Let's, get you some water, okay?" he said, voice strangled. But Maya shook her head, burrowing further into my side. "I want to stay here. Mommy said this is home." That's when I noticed her backpack bore a faded patch that looked handmade, stitched clumsily but with love. Mark tried again, more urgent this time. Let's step in the hallway, Maya. Come on, it'll be fun." She planted herself on the welcome mat and fixed him with the most defiant stare I've ever seen from someone under 4 feet tall. "No, I'm staying with my dad." Every syllable was a hammer on my nerves. I could feel Mark's panic radiating off him in sweaty waves. Jess, ever the pragmatist, said what we were all thinking. "Is this some kind of joke? Mark, did you know about this?" Mark sputtered, "Of course not. Why would I?" But his eyes betrayed him, darting, pleading, terrified. I took the folded note from Maya's fist, hoping it would offer answers, or better yet, explain how I could extricate myself from this circus. The paper felt soft from being gripped, corners bent, and smelled faintly of lavender soap. I unfolded it carefully. The handwriting, loopy, a little rushed, was oddly familiar. It read, "If anything happens to me, please keep Maya safe. You promised. She trusts you. L." I stared at the words, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I hadn't promised anything. I'd never met this little girl. But as I read the note again, something about the way the lowercase l curled at the bottom tugged at my memory. It was like déjà vu, familiar but impossible to place. I looked up at Mark, who was now sweating bullets. Is this your idea of a joke? I asked, voice low. Mark shook his head, wide-eyed. I swear, I have no idea what's going on. Maybe the kid's mom, maybe she's got the wrong apartment. Jess cut him off, skepticism sharpening her voice. Then why does the note have his name? And why does she look so sure? Maya hugged my arm tighter, her small fingers digging into my skin. Can you read it to me? She whispered. I knelt beside her and read the message aloud, trying to steady my voice. When I finished, she nodded solemnly. That's from Mommy. She says you're gonna help me now. A thick silence filled the room. I could hear the distant hum of traffic outside, the high-pitched whine of the fridge cycling on. Mark's face had drained of color, and Jess looked like she was about to start interrogating us with a flashlight. Mark grabbed my arm, steering me toward the hallway. 2 seconds, he muttered, then raised his voice. Jess, can you stay with Maya? Jess folded her arms but nodded. I glanced back. Maya stood rooted in place, watching me go with wide, unblinking eyes. Mark dragged me down the hall, shutting the bedroom door behind us. His hands were shaking. I need to tell you something, he said, voice barely above a whisper. But you gotta promise you'll hear me out. Mark, what's going on? He pressed his back to the door, eyes darting. She's mine. Maya's my daughter. The words hung there, heavy as stone. I tried to process it, but he kept going, voice cracking. Her mom, Lena, she disappeared. 2 weeks ago. I got a text, then nothing. This morning a neighbor texted, said Maya was missing. I thought she was with Lena's sister, but he scrubbed his face with his hands, breathing hard. I have no idea why she'd come here, or why she'd leave you that note. But if Jess finds out. He stopped, swallowing hard, eyes wild. You can't tell her, please. Jess doesn't know about any of this. I never told her about Lena or Maya. I thought, they were gone, you know? Lena said she'd never come back. Please, I need you to play along. Just until I find Lena. Just until I figure this out. There was a beat where I just stared at him. The hum of the old radiator filled the silence. My head spun. Mark was the kind of guy who ironed his socks and remembered everyone's birthday. This secret family didn't fit with anything I thought I knew about him. Why me? I asked. He slumped against the wall. I don't know. Maybe Lena was desperate. Maybe she remembered that one time she met you, at that party. Maybe she thought you'd be the only one who wouldn't freak out. That didn't make sense, but my mind was already racing ahead. Maya was alone, scared, and for reasons I couldn't explain, she'd been brought to my doorstep. I'll do it, I said, barely believing the words. But only until we find her mom. Mark let out a shaky breath, nodding. Thank you. I'll figure this out, I swear. When we returned to the living room, Jess was sitting cross-legged on the floor, trying to coax a smile out of Maya with promises of hot chocolate. Maya looked up at me as if she'd been waiting for me all along. I forced a smile. Guess we have a guest tonight. Maya's face lit up, and the tension in the room thinned just a little. But Jess didn't take her eyes off me, her suspicion growing roots. The next few days blurred into a strange routine. Maya clung to my side, her tiny hand finding mine whenever we walked down the hall or watched TV. Sometimes, she'd ask me simple questions. What's your favorite color? Do you like pancakes? And I'd answer, trying to sound like someone who had a clue what he was doing. Mark grew more frantic each day, fielding mysterious phone calls in the bathroom and checking his email obsessively. Jess, meanwhile, watched every interaction with Maya like she was assembling a mental jigsaw puzzle, one she didn't have all the pieces for. One afternoon, as I helped Maya draw with colored pencils, she reached for my hand. Will you be at my birthday? She asked. Her birthday. I glanced at Mark, who looked like he might faint. Of course, I said, improvising. When's your birthday? She beamed. Today. Mark's eyes widened. It's today? Maya nodded, clearly delighted. Jess jumped in. Well, then, we need cake. Right? So began the most surreal birthday party I've ever thrown. We made cupcakes from a box, baked with the oven door hanging open because the hinge was broken. Maya insisted we all wear paper hats, so Jess made some out of old magazines. There were no presents, but Maya didn't seem to mind. She blew out a single candle, eyes shining. As the party wound down, I sat beside Maya on the couch, the sticky scent of frosting clinging to my fingers. She leaned against me, eyelids drooping. Jess, clearing plates, asked Mark, so, how did you two meet, again? I never got the full story. Mark fumbled. At a work thing, right? Before I could answer, Maya stirred, mumbling in her sleep. Her lips formed a word, Papa. Jess froze, plate in hand. Did she just? Mark coughed, almost dropping his cupcake. She, probably heard that in a movie. I forced a laugh, but my heart thudded against my ribs. Jess narrowed her eyes, but let it go, for now. Later that night, as Mark and Jess argued quietly in the kitchen, I tucked Maya into the guest room. She looked up at me, eyes shining in the dim glow of a nightlight. "Is Mommy coming soon?" she whispered. A knot formed in my throat. "We're trying to find her, Maya. We'll keep you safe until she comes back." She nodded, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. "Thank you, Daddy." I sat on the edge of the mattress long after she drifted off, listening to the distant, muffled voices from the kitchen. The apartment felt smaller than ever, the air heavy with secrets. The next morning, with Mark gone on another frantic errand, I decided I couldn't sit idle. I needed answers. If Maya's note was real, if her mom had left her here intentionally, I had to know why. While Maya watched cartoons, I slipped into Mark's room and started searching. I felt a little guilty, but the stakes were too high. Rifling through desk drawers, I found a stack of bank receipts. Hidden among them were wire transfers, regular payments sent to an account under a woman's name I didn't recognize. But the contact info listed was me. My name, my email, my old phone number from college. My stomach flipped. I snapped a quick photo of one receipt, then heard footsteps in the hall. I ducked out just as Jess poked her head in. "Everything okay?" she asked, eyes lingering on my face. "Yeah, just, looking for a flashlight," I lied. She didn't look convinced, but let it drop. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I called the number from the receipts. It rang twice, then went to voicemail, a woman's voice, strangely familiar, instructing me to leave a message. I hung up without speaking. My hands shook. The next day, Jess found a folder tucked behind the bookshelf while dusting. I heard her gasp, then the scrape of paper. When I entered the living room, she was holding a stack of photos, Mark and a woman I recognized instantly as Lena, laughing in a sunlit park, holding a toddler-aged Maya between them. There were birthday cakes, Christmas trees, little Maya on Mark's shoulders. Jess's face was pale with shock. "Mark, what is this?" she called, voice shaking. Mark froze in the kitchen archway, a glass of water in hand. Jess thrust the photos at him. "Who are these people? Why have you been hiding this?" The room seemed to shrink as all eyes landed on Mark. Maya peeked through the doorway, sensing the tension. I stood frozen, realizing that the knot of lies we'd been spinning was about to unravel, and I had a front row seat to the fallout. And that's when Jess, voice trembling but clear, turned to me. "And you knew, didn't you?" I swallowed. The secrets, the note, the fake birthday, the late-night calls, they all pressed in at once. The only thing I knew for sure was that none of us were leaving this room the same as we'd entered it. What would Mark say next? And what would Maya remember? The truth was finally cornered, and about to come out, whether any of us were ready or not. The living room was a war zone of hurt feelings and confusion. Mark slumped on the edge of the couch, his hands trembling, while Jess paced furiously, her boots thumping against the floor. Maya hovered at the edge of it all, clutching her little backpack, eyes wide. I felt like a ghost in my own apartment, but I knew it was time for answers, no matter how complicated they were. "Mark, you have to tell her everything," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "We can't keep Maya in the dark. Or Jess, for that matter." He dragged a shaky hand through his hair, then met my eyes. There was resignation there, and something like relief. "You're right," he said. "No more secrets." Jess stopped pacing, arms folded. "Start talking. Now." Mark took a deep breath, glancing at Maya, then back at us. When Maya was born, things with her mom, Emily, were already messy. Custody battles, lawyers, the works. It wasn't safe sometimes. Emily didn't trust a lot of people, but she met you once, remember? At that Christmas party, years ago. I blinked, the memory surfacing. A tired young woman, a baby swaddled in pink, and Mark introducing us in a noisy kitchen. I'd offered to hold Maya while Emily got a plate of food. She'd smiled at me, grateful. I'd forgotten it until now. "She put your name down as Maya's legal guardian if anything ever happened to us," Mark went on, his voice cracking. "It was a long shot, but she said you seemed like someone who'd actually care. I didn't even know until she showed me the papers. The last I heard, she left the country with Maya, and I didn't think I'd ever see them again. When Maya showed up here looking for you, I realized Emily must have told her somehow, to find you if she was ever in trouble." A thick silence settled. The gravity of it hit me. I wasn't just an accidental player in this drama. My name was literally on the line for Maya's safety. Jess looked between us, her jaw set. "So all the years you told me you had no family, that your ex was out of the picture, it was a lie? You just erased them?" Mark shook his head, tears in his eyes. "I was scared, Jess. I thought if anyone found out, Maya would be in more danger. And I didn't want to drag you into a mess you didn't sign up for." Jess's voice trembled. You don't get to decide what I sign up for. That's not how this works. Maya stepped forward, her voice small but firm. Please, don't fight. Can we all just stop yelling for a minute? I'm scared. Her words cut through the tension sharper than any argument. I knelt down beside her, the feel of her little hand squeezing mine. Mark looked up, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time, he didn't try to hide them. I'm sorry, Maya, he said softly, his voice shaking. I should have been braver. For you. For everyone. Jess's shoulders sagged, the fight going out of her. She sat down next to Mark and took his hand, squeezing it tight. We'll figure this out. Together. No more secrets. The moment felt like a fragile truce, the kind that could break with a word. But for now, it was enough. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, but picked up. On the other end, a breathless, familiar voice. Is Maya safe? This is Emily. Please, don't tell anyone I called. I need help. I glanced at Maya, her face suddenly hopeful. Emily? I breathed. Where are you? She whispered, I'm in the city, but I can't let anyone see me. There are people looking for us. I just need to know Maya's all right. I'll come if it's safe, can you help? My heart raced. She's safe, Emily. We'll keep her safe. Tell me where you are and we'll figure it out. She rattled off an address, her voice ragged with worry and relief. Thank you. I don't know who else to trust. Before I could say more, the line cut out. I turned to Mark and Jess, my voice urgent. That was Emily. She's alive. She's here in the city. She needs our help to come back safely. Mark's eyes widened, hope and fear mingling. Jess grabbed her purse, already in motion. Let's go. We're not letting anything happen to that kid, or her mom. We left the apartment in a flurry, Maya's small hand tucked into mine. Outside, the night air felt electric, sharp against my skin. Every shadow seemed to move, but we walked together, a strange new kind of family forged by crisis. When we reached the meeting place, a quiet park near the river, Emily emerged from the dark, looking exhausted but determined. She swept Maya into her arms, crying openly. I felt something shift inside me watching them, something fierce, protective, and oddly proud. Back at the apartment, the four of us sat around the table. Mark apologized again. Emily, still wary, forgave him, on the condition that he be honest from now on. Jess, shakily, agreed. Maya yawned, her head on her mom's shoulder. Can I come visit again? For real this time? She asked, eyes flicking between us. I laughed, the tension finally breaking. Anytime, Maya. You're always welcome. Mark squeezed my shoulder. Thank you, he said, voice thick. For everything. As the sun rose, I realized the secrets that nearly tore us apart had also stitched us together in ways none of us expected. Maybe family wasn't just about blood or paperwork. Sometimes, it was about being the person someone needed, when it mattered most. 2 years ago, my best friend Jamie saved me from the worst mistake of my life, and I owed him everything. It happened on a freezing January night, when the world felt like it was closing in. I was 17, furious at my parents over something stupid I can't even remember now, and I did what any dumb teenager does. I ran. Not just out the front door, but into the streets, no shoes, no plan, just pure adrenaline and bad decisions. I texted Jamie from the edge of the park, my thumbs shaking so hard I could barely type. Can you come get me? 5 minutes later, headlights cut through the darkness and there he was, unzipping his puffy blue jacket to throw it over my shoulders. I was sobbing, shivering, humiliated. Jamie didn't say a word, just steered me into his car, cranked the heat, and handed me one of those awful gas station hot chocolates. When he dropped me back at home, he went straight to my parents and told them I just needed someone to talk to. He took the blame for convincing me to sneak out, and somehow, they believed him. That night, I would have crashed and burned alone, but Jamie was my safety net. After that, our bond felt unbreakable. The thing about Jamie is, he didn't just have my back in the big moments, he was always there in the small ones, too. Every afternoon after school, we'd meet at the cracked basketball court behind Miller's Grocery, the one with the metal nets that rattled whenever a shot went in. He could always drain a three-pointer, even with the wind screaming in from the highway nearby. We'd walk to my place, shoes squeaking on the kitchen tiles, and raid the fridge for leftover lasagna or freezer pops. My mom loved him. She'd say, "You eat more here than at home, Jamie," and he'd just wink, tossing his backpack on the banister. My dad trusted him enough to lend him his old toolbox for shop class projects, like he was another son. We'd do homework at the dining table, feet tangled in the chair legs, whispering jokes while the scent of fresh laundry drifted in from the mudroom. Jamie knew the passcode to our garage and the trick to jiggling the basement window open if we ever forgot our keys. He'd even sleep over on the pull-out couch when my parents went out of town, making sure the house never felt empty. For years, it felt like Jamie was just part of the family. We shared everything. Notes folded into tiny squares during math, Spotify playlists, even dumb confessions about crushes or dreams. Once, when I panicked about a chemistry final, Jamie spent 3 hours with me at the kitchen table, explaining equations on the condensation-fogged window. When his parents started fighting more, he'd crash at our place, just to get some sleep. I always thought I knew all his secrets. I mean, I trusted him with mine. But lately, things had started feeling off. It started small, just these odd little things, details I could ignore if I wanted to. A jar of coins missing from my dresser. My mom's favorite measuring spoons, gone from their hook. A video game controller I could have sworn I left in the living room, but then it turned up in the basement. I kept telling myself I was just forgetful, or that my younger brother had borrowed stuff and not put it back. There was this one night, maybe a month ago, when I got home late from a study group. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and our old dog snoring in his crate. I tossed my bag in the hallway, and that's when I saw it. For half a second, poking out from behind the coat rack, there was a flash of navy blue nylon. Jamie's jacket. He hadn't texted me that day, and I knew he wasn't supposed to be there. My heart thudded in my chest as I reached for it, half expecting Jamie himself to lunge from the shadows. But when I checked, the house was empty. The jacket was gone. I convinced myself I must have imagined it, that maybe it was my own jacket or that Jamie had left it behind from last week. Still, I couldn't shake the chill that crept up my spine. The next morning, I noticed someone had moved my mom's jewelry box. The lid was open, and her favorite gold locket was lying on the floor. I didn't want to believe it, so I said nothing. Not to my parents, not even to Jamie. But the feeling lingered, heavy and sour, each time I walked into a room and found something out of place. Was I losing my mind? Or was something happening right under our noses? That's where I was, clinging to the idea that everything was fine, desperate to keep trusting the person who'd always been my lifeline. But if I'd looked a little closer, I might have seen the cracks forming in our perfect friendship. I might have realized that sometimes, the people we let closest can hide the darkest secrets. And I had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. My hands were shaking as I screwed the tiny camera into the picture frame in the hallway. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that maybe my keys had just gone missing, or that the creak I'd heard on the stairs was the house settling. But the voice in my head kept repeating, Jamie. It can't be Jamie. Still, my gut told me I needed proof, so I set the trap. I left for the library just after 5, wearing my backpack and slamming the door hard for effect. I waited around the corner in the drizzle, my heart pounding every time a car passed. Minutes crawled by. I checked my phone, watching the feed from the camera. Nothing happened at first, just the steady pulse of rain on the window, the hallway dark and quiet, the clock ticking on the wall. Then, my stomach dropped. The front door eased open with the slowest, careful push, and Jamie, my best friend since we were 7, slipped inside, glancing over his shoulder like someone in a bad spy movie. I watched, frozen, as he moved with way too much confidence, heading straight to the cabinet in the living room. He didn't even hesitate. He shoved aside a pile of old mail and started rifling through the drawers, fast, practiced, like he'd done it before. I couldn't wait anymore. I crashed through the front door, my shoes squeaking on the entry mat. Jamie, I shouted, my voice cracked with something between anger and disbelief. He spun around, eyes wide, hands still gripping the drawer. For a second we just stared at each other, the only sound the rain outside. I realized I was breathing hard, my fists clenched. What the hell are you doing in my house? I snapped. Jamie's face went pale. He stammered, it isn't what it looks like, man, I swear. I took a step closer, my voice shaking. So what is it, then? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're robbing me. He dropped the drawer and it landed with a clatter. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the door. You wouldn't understand. I swallowed, my throat tight. Try me. He shook his head, stepping back from me. I can't. You have to trust me, okay? Trust him? The words stung. I could smell the faint scent of rain on his jacket, the sharp tang of nervous sweat in the room. I could see the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes wouldn't meet mine. For a second, all I wanted was for him to blurt out some explanation, to tell me this was some stupid joke or dare. But Jamie just stood there, staring at the floor, refusing to explain. I felt the anger and confusion swirl together inside me, making my skin crawl. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but all I could do was whisper, get out. He hesitated, then slipped past me, out into the wet night, the door closing softly behind him. I stood frozen in the dark, the silence of the house pressing down on me. My best friend, the guy who'd pulled me out of more disasters than I could count, had just broken into my home, and he wouldn't even tell me why. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jamie's pale, guilty face. My mind raced through every memory, every hint I'd missed. I thought about the late-night texts he'd started ignoring, the way he'd seemed distracted lately, always glancing at his phone or looking over his shoulder when we hung out. By morning, the confusion had calcified into something harder, a need to know the truth. So I started digging. I called Jamie's house, hoping his mom would pick up, but got his little sister instead. "Hey, is Jamie home?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated. He's not here. He said he was staying after school for a project." That was weird. Jamie hated school projects, and he'd never been shy about complaining. Besides, it was a Saturday. I asked, "Is everything okay?" She lowered her voice. "He's been weird lately. Mom's super mad. He got detention twice this week. He's grounded, but he keeps sneaking out." The unease deepened. I thanked her and hung up, my fingers cold around my phone. Jamie, getting detention? Lying to his family? It didn't fit. I scrolled through our messages, looking for clues. The weeks before, there were gaps, full days he didn't answer. Messages from me, "You up?" and "Dude, movie night?" went ignored or got a single word answer hours later. I walked to school, hoping maybe someone had seen him. In the bright, echoing hallways, I asked around. His lab partner frowned when I mentioned Jamie's name. He stopped coming to class. Said he was sick, but then I saw him downtown, hanging by the bus stop. He looked rough. I pressed for more, but no one had answers. It was like Jamie had turned into a ghost, a kid-shaped shadow slipping out of sight. That evening, back at home, I replayed everything, my memories stacking up like puzzle pieces that didn't fit. It didn't make sense. Jamie wasn't a thief. He hated secrets. But as I paced the floor in my socks, my foot caught the edge of the old rug in the study. I stumbled, and the rug slid, revealing a loose floorboard. My breath caught. I knelt and pried it up, my fingers finding the edge worn smooth by years of use. Inside was a small, faded envelope, sealed with wax. I stared at it, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I'd never seen it before. On the front, in my late uncle's cramped handwriting, was my family's last name. The air smelled musty, the dust tickling my nose. I hesitated, my hand hovering above the envelope. My uncle had died when I was 10, and my family only ever mentioned him in whispers. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I called my mom into the room. She looked at the envelope, her face going white. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. I pointed at the floorboard. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" She hugged herself, her knuckles white. "We thought it was lost. After your uncle died, things got complicated. He was always hiding things, money, notes, even keys. He was paranoid." It felt like the whole room shrank, the air thick with secrets. I held up the envelope. "Did Jamie know about this?" My mom shook her head, but the look in her eyes told me she suspected something. I set the envelope on the table, the wax seal unbroken, the mystery humming between us. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the wind scraping tree branches against the siding outside. Jamie hadn't come back. He hadn't texted. I wondered if he was watching my house, waiting for me to leave again. I decided I needed answers, even if Jamie wouldn't give them to me. So I started digging into my own family. I pulled out old photo albums, letters, dusty boxes my mom kept in the basement. There were pictures of my uncle, younger, laughing with people I didn't recognize. Receipts from strange places, wads of cash stuffed inside books. One letter caught my eye. It was addressed to someone with Jamie's last name. My mind reeled. Why would my uncle be writing to Jamie's family? I snapped a photo of the letter and sent it to Jamie with a single text. "What are you not telling me?" He didn't answer. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. I was almost ready to give up when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was low, rough, and urgent. "Are you alone?" the voice asked. I hesitated. "Who is this?" There was a pause. "You don't know me, but I know your family. And I know Jamie. He's in trouble. If you want to help him, you need to listen." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I felt like I was in a thriller, only this was my actual life. I asked, "What do you want?" "Meet me behind the old church at midnight. Don't bring anyone. And whatever you do, don't open that envelope." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, chills running down my arms. My room felt suddenly colder, like the secrets in the house had crept out of the walls. I waited until everyone was asleep, then slipped out, hoodie pulled over my head, heart hammering with every step. The air outside was sharp, the smell of wet earth and dying leaves thick in my nose. When I got to the church, I saw Jamie standing there, arms crossed, shivering in the light of the street lamp. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, eyes red, cheeks hollow. He saw me and shook his head. You shouldn't have come. I demanded. What's going on, Jamie? Who called me? He glanced at the shadows. Someone who wants to ruin both our families. Look, I never meant for you to get dragged into this. But, he broke off, rubbing his face. It started months ago. I got this message from some guy who said he was related to us. He knew things about my dad, about your uncle. He threatened to hurt my little sister if I didn't do what he wanted. He said there was something hidden in your house, something he needed. My mouth went dry. The envelope. I asked, who is this guy? Jamie looked terrified. He says he's our cousin. But nobody in my family will talk about him. He's been blackmailing me. He has pictures, stuff that could ruin my dad. I didn't know what to do. He kicked at a patch of gravel, the crunch echoing in the empty lot. That's why I was sneaking around. I thought if I found whatever he wanted, maybe he'd leave us alone. A car drove past, headlights sweeping over us, and we both flinched. I could taste the fear in the air, thick and metallic. I asked, why didn't you just tell me? Jamie's voice broke. I wanted to. I almost did, 100 times. But every time I tried, he'd send me another threat. I was scared. My anger fizzled, replaced by something heavier, a mix of dread and protectiveness. Jamie looked so small, hugging himself against the cold. I took a shaky breath. We need to go to the police. He shook his head. If we do, he'll know. He has eyes everywhere. He said if we go to anyone, he'll hurt our families. I pulled out my phone, hands numb. Jamie, we can't do this alone. He grabbed my arm. Please, just trust me. Let's figure this out, together. Don't open that envelope yet. If we do, we might make things worse. I stared at my best friend, the kid who'd stood by me through every disaster, and realized just how much danger we were both in. The secrets weren't just his. They were mine, too, woven through both our families like barbed wire. That night, alone in my room, I turned the envelope over in my hands. The wax seal felt rough under my thumb. My phone buzzed with a message from Jamie. Don't do anything until I call. Promise me. I texted back. I promise. But you have to tell me everything. No more secrets. His reply came seconds later. Okay. Tomorrow. You'll know everything. But as I put my phone down, I realized the truth. Whether we were ready or not, the past was coming for us, and this time, it wasn't going to let us go so easily. I stared at Jamie, his desperate confession echoing in my ears. There was no denying it now. My best friend, the guy I'd trusted with everything since middle school, had been sneaking into my house, all because someone was blackmailing him. I felt my heart pounding, torn between anger and fear, but underneath it all, there was this ache that came from understanding how scared he was. You can't keep doing this, I said, voice barely a whisper. My hands shook as I squeezed them into fists. If my parents catch you, it's over. For both of us. Jamie's eyes were glossy, red-rimmed. I know, but if they get that envelope, it's over for my mom. You know what she's done. They'll ruin her, maybe worse. I was trying to protect you, too. His words hung between us, heavy and raw. The envelope. That stupid, incriminating envelope my dad had hidden in our safe, the one with proof about Mrs. Tran's old business deals, and apparently, a secret my parents never told me about. My mind spun. Did I risk everything to protect my family, or help Jamie outsmart the person blackmailing him, even if it meant lying to everyone I loved? I watched sunlight slant through the cracked garage window, catching dust in gold beams. I remembered all the times Jamie had my back, even when I made it hard. But this was different. There was no easy out. Who's blackmailing you? I asked. Jamie tugged at the sleeve of his hoodie, voice barely audible. I can't say. If I do, they'll go after my sister next. They said they'd hurt her if I told. I pressed my palms to my eyes, struggling to breathe. Okay, I'll help you, I said, forcing the words out. But we have to do this my way. No more sneaking around. We'll make the envelope disappear, so nobody can use it against anyone. But then you're coming clean to your mom. And I'm telling my parents, too. He looked at me like I'd just thrown him a life preserver in a storm. You'd do that? He asked, voice trembling. I don't want to, but I can't lose you, Jamie. I just want this to stop, I said, feeling tears sting the corners of my eyes. The next 24 hours were a blur. We waited until my parents were out, then crept into the den. My fingers shook as I opened the safe, its metal cold and solid beneath my hand. We pulled out the envelope, the one that could burn both our families to the ground, and I hesitated for a long, silent second. Then, together, we shredded every page and watched the pieces swirl into the fireplace, curling and blackening to ash. For a moment, I thought we'd done it. But the fallout was impossible to avoid. The next day, my dad stormed into my room, waving his hands. Did you touch anything in the safe? He demanded. I swallowed, feeling my cheeks flush hot. I did. I'm sorry, Dad, I had to. My parents were furious. Jamie's mom found out, too, and the Tran family stopped talking to mine for a while. My house felt hollow with the silence, no more sleepovers, no more laughter from the next room. But Jamie and I survived, somehow. We kept our promise. He told his mom the truth, and I came clean to mine. It wasn't easy. Trust, once burned, leaves scars. I guess I finally understood that. Months later, Jamie and I sat on the old swings behind the elementary school, the air sharp with the scent of cut grass. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Thanks for not giving up on me, Jamie said quietly, pushing his shoe through the dirt. I looked up at the clouds, feeling the weight of everything we'd lost and everything we'd somehow managed to keep. We're different now, I said. But I think that's okay. We never went back to how things were. But we found a new kind of friendship, one built on hard truths instead of easy secrets. And even though my family would never trust him the same way, I knew we'd made the right choice. Some bonds survive the fire, they just come out changed. Last spring, my younger sister Zoe started keeping a diary she guarded with her life, and one morning, it vanished from her nightstand. This morning, I found a page from her diary taped to my bedroom door, with a secret about me written in her handwriting. I never told her what she wrote, and I have no idea how she could possibly know the one thing I've desperately been hiding. By the end of this story, I'll reveal exactly what my sister found out, and how it changed everything between us. Let me back up to the beginning, because if you'd told me a year ago that I'd be brought to my knees by something as dorky as my little sister's diary, I would have laughed in your face. Zoe and I have always had what most people would call a normal sibling relationship, which basically means, on the surface, we bicker like cartoon rivals but can't go a single day without weird, inside jokes or defending each other to the death. Our fights are epic. Our alliances are unbreakable. It's like a seesaw that never stays balanced for long. After school, we'd dump our backpacks in the hallway, and like clockwork, Zoe would hog the bathroom, blasting her playlist while I waited outside pretending I wasn't listening through the door. She'd emerge in oversized hoodies, hair up, the scent of her strawberry shampoo trailing behind her. She'd roll her eyes at me and say, "You know eavesdropping is a crime, right?" I'd raise an eyebrow. I wouldn't be forced to commit crimes if you didn't take 12 years in there. On the outside, it was all familiar chaos. Someone yelling about lost shoes, microwave popcorn burning, our mom calling for us to set the table. But underneath, there was this electric hum, both of us quietly protecting the pieces of ourselves we didn't want seen. She'd angle her phone away when I walked by, and I'd close my laptop a little too quickly when she entered the room. Sometimes, she'd glance at me, eyes narrowed like she was trying to solve a puzzle that kept changing shape. We had this unspoken rule. Everyone's allowed one secret, as long as you don't ask too many questions. But secrets, as I would learn, don't really like being kept. The real shift started last spring, when Zoe got her hands on this chunky purple diary with a cheap, golden lock and a pen attached by a curly cord. She treated it like it was the crown jewels. At first, we all thought it was a phase, a 6th grade rite of passage, maybe something her friends were doing too. But Zoe was obsessed. She'd scribble furiously in it at the dinner table, then snap it shut and shove it under her leg if anyone got too close. She'd write in bed, knees drawn up, hair falling like a curtain so you couldn't see the page. Even late at night, if I passed her door, I'd catch the faint scratch of her pen, the soft glow of her reading light. Sometimes I could hear her mutter, "No one's allowed," as if the diary might talk back if she didn't remind it. One time, our cousin tried to open it while Zoe was in the bathroom. I was sprawled on the living room rug, pretending not to watch, but I saw the panic in his eyes when Zoe caught him. She didn't yell, she just snatched it from his hands and stared him down until he backed away mumbling apologies. After that, she taped a neon pink sign to her door that read, "Diary Zone. Trespassers will be prosecuted." She even threatened to booby-trap her nightstand with glitter bombs. I believed her. I have to admit, her extreme protectiveness made it hard not to be curious. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the diary's gold lock, wondering what could possibly be so important. Crushes? Secret codes? Not that I'd ever admit I cared. But as the months went on, her obsession only grew. I'd see her flip the pages backward and forward, frowning at things she wrote, biting her thumbnail. It was like she was storing not just her secrets, but the secrets of the whole universe in there. The more she guarded it, the more it felt like a forbidden treasure chest, radiating a signal that said, "Come on, just peek." Then came the morning everything blew up. It was a Saturday, the one day a week we could sleep in. I remember waking to Zoe's voice, louder, sharper than her usual morning grumbles. At first I thought she was arguing with our mom about pancakes. But when I walked into the hallway, she was standing in front of her open bedroom door, staring at her nightstand like it had betrayed her. My diary's gone, she shouted, voice cracking. Her cheeks were blotchy, eyes wild, hair sticking up like static. It was right here last night. Who took it? For a second, nobody moved. Our mom froze mid-toast, and even our cat paused halfway through scratching the couch. Zoe's panic was contagious, a kind of electricity that spread through the house. I tried to sound casual. Maybe you moved it and forgot? Zoe shot me a glare so lethal I almost flinched. I don't forget, Mom, it was right here. Our mom did her best to calm things down, but Zoe was already tearing her room apart, sheets flying, drawers yanked, clothes tossed onto the floor. She checked under the bed, then on top of her bookshelf, muttering to herself the whole time. The air in the house grew thick, charged, as if we were all holding our breath. Are you sure you didn't take it? She said, rounding on me. I raised my hands. Swear on my life. I haven't even touched your weirdo diary. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way she squinted, lips pressed tight. Our mom asked if anyone else had been in the house. Our cousin? The neighbor kid? But no one could come up with a good explanation. It was like the diary had vanished into thin air. The weirdest part was, for a split second, I wondered if she was pulling some dramatic stunt for attention. But the way she hugged her knees on the carpet, eyes red and hands shaking, told me this was real fear. The diary meant everything to her, and now it was gone. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about missing pages and secrets, it was about trust. About the invisible line we'd drawn between us, and what might happen if it suddenly dissolved. No one confessed. No one had any answers. The tension hung over breakfast like a storm cloud, and the rest of the day, Zoe barely spoke to anyone. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop wondering, if her diary really did disappear, what secrets might be out there? And what would happen if any of them had to do with me? That was the day things started to unravel, and I had no idea just how close my own secrets were to being exposed. At first, I thought maybe I was just seeing things. An edge of paper sticking out from under my pillow, a hastily scribbled note left on my windowsill, a word here or there that matched Zoe's loopy handwriting. But as the days went on, the notes became impossible to ignore. Every time I entered my room, I scanned the surfaces, heart-thudding. On the back of my desk chair, a torn corner, I know. In the pocket of my hoodie, a folded scrap. Secrets have a way of spilling. The house felt different, too, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. I'd be in the hallway and swear I saw Zoe slip around the corner, her hair swinging. Once, I heard the faintest giggle from her room, muffled by the closed door. I paused outside, hand hovering, but couldn't bring myself to knock. My chest was tight, as if someone had cinched a belt just beneath my ribs. I began to wonder what, exactly, she knew. Each clue felt more deliberate. On my bathroom mirror, written in soap, "You can't hide forever." The handwriting was hers. I stared at the message as the steam from my shower blurred the words, distorting the letters until they were unreadable. Paranoia crept in. I caught myself retracing my steps, locking my door, double-checking windows. One night, I moved every item on my desk, searching for hidden notes. My hands shook as I shuffled through notebooks, half expecting another message to flutter out. I didn't want to admit it, even to myself, but there was one secret I was desperate to keep. One mistake from months ago, buried so deep I'd convinced myself no one could ever dig it up. I tried to act normal at dinner. Mom served pasta, Zoe twirled her fork and hummed. She didn't look at me, not really. I caught her glancing down at her lap, as if she was hiding something there. My skin prickled. I forced a smile, but the food tasted like cardboard. Afterward, I retreated to my room, hoping for peace. But the notes kept appearing, under my pillow, inside my backpack, even in the pocket of my favorite jeans. Each one was a riddle, a dare, a taunt. You owe me the truth. Time's up. My dreams were restless, haunted by the scrawl of Zoe's handwriting looping endlessly across the walls. One morning, sunlight spilled onto my bedroom floor. I yawned, rolled over, and froze. There, taped to my door, was a page torn clean out of Zoe's diary. My stomach dropped. I approached it slowly, heart pounding so loud I could hear nothing else. No birds, no distant hum of the highway, just the thud-thud-thud in my chest. The page was lined, the ink slightly smudged. I peeled it from the door with trembling fingers and read. Date. 3 months ago. The words were unmistakable, each letter formed with the same careful precision Zoe always used when writing something important. I think I know what happened to my blue sweater. I found a tag in the laundry room, half burned. I remember the day I got blamed for leaving the dryer running and ruining it. But I saw something weird that day. Someone else was there before me. I think it was my sibling. My vision blurred. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the page trembling in my grip. She knew, or at least, she suspected. And she'd written it down, obsessed over it enough to make it the centerpiece of her missing diary, and now she'd given it to me. For a few seconds, all I could do was stare at the words. There was a time when Zoe and I told each other everything, midnight whispers, pinky promises. Now, there was a gulf between us, and she was daring me to cross it. I swallowed, trying to steady my breathing. Was she taunting me, begging me to confess, or just playing some twisted game? Either way, my secret wasn't safe anymore. This was her opening move, and I had no idea what she'd do next. I needed answers. I stormed into the hallway, the page crumpled in my fist. The kitchen was filled with morning light, Zoe at the counter, eating cereal straight from the box. She didn't look up. "Zoe," I said, my voice rough in my throat. "What is this?" She paused, milk dripping from her spoon, her eyes flickering to the page in my hand. "You found it," she said, not quite smiling. "Why did you tape it to my door?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it trembled at the edges. "Are you trying to mess with me?" She shrugged, swirling her spoon in lazy circles. "Maybe I just wanted some answers." I leaned on the counter, pressing the page flat against the cool surface. "How much do you know?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. She met my eyes, hers guarded, dark. "How much do you want me to know?" she shot back. "You're the one who's been acting weird. Maybe you have something to tell me?" Anger and fear churned in my chest. "You're the one leaving notes everywhere. You think I don't see them?" A smile flickered at the corner of her mouth. "Maybe I just want you to notice me. You haven't talked to me in weeks." "That's not true," I said, my cheeks burning. I've just been busy." "With what?" she pressed. "Hiding things? Hiding from me?" She was needling me, pressing right up against the truth but never quite saying it. My grip tightened on the edge of the counter. "If you want to accuse me of something, just say it." She looked away, her voice smaller now. "I just want to know why." For a second, we were both silent, the hum of the fridge the only sound between us. Zoe's shoulders curled inward, like she was folding herself up, guarding something fragile inside. I wanted to tell her. The words itched under my tongue. But part of me was still terrified, of what she might say, of what it would mean for us if I admitted everything. Instead, I blurted, "It was an accident. That day with your sweater. I wasn't trying to." I cut myself off, the confession half formed. The rest stuck in my throat. She looked at me, her eyes wide. "I knew it. I knew it was you. But I didn't mean to," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, a strange smile tugging at her lips. "I wish you'd just told me. I hated thinking Mom was mad at me for something I didn't do." Guilt slammed into me so hard I almost staggered. I swallowed, unable to meet her gaze. "I'm sorry," I said. She nodded, but didn't say anything more. She crunched her cereal, the sound suddenly unbearably loud. That was as close as we got to the truth, dancing around it, both afraid to take the final step. I retreated to my room, my mind buzzing, the diary page still clutched in my hand. As I sat on my bed, I couldn't help but replay that day over and over again in my mind. The memory came back sharp and bright, like a splinter under the skin. It was late winter. I was in a rush, basketball practice, homework piling up, Mom already grumbling about laundry. Zoe's favorite blue sweater was in the dryer, and I needed to dry my own stuff fast. In my hurry, I accidentally set the heat too high, then forgot about it when my phone buzzed. By the time I remembered, it was too late. The sweater was scorched, the tag half melted. Panic shot through me. I snatched it out, tried to fluff it up, but the fabric was ruined. I threw it behind the machine. When Zoe came looking for it, Mom found the mess and blamed her for being careless. She cried. I stayed silent, ashamed and sick. For weeks afterward, Zoe moped around, convinced she'd let everyone down. I wanted to say something, to take the blame, but every time I tried, my throat closed up. The guilt grew, twisting tighter every day. I told myself it would fade, that it was just a sweater, but I could see the hurt in Zoe's eyes each time she passed the laundry room. I started leaving little gifts for her, her favorite candy, a new pen for her diary, a note saying, "You're the best." But nothing made up for the secret I was keeping. Every time she looked at me, I wondered if she knew. Now, with the diary page in my hand, everything was out in the open. She hadn't confronted me outright, but she was forcing me to see it, to own up to what I'd done. And even though I'd tried to bury the memory, it was back, raw, painful, impossible to ignore. I had to make a choice. Keep running from it, or finally face what I'd done. I glanced at the page again, tracing Zoe's careful handwriting. There were still gaps, things unspoken between us. But for the first time, I wondered if she wanted the truth as much as I did, if maybe, just maybe, we could start to find our way back to each other. But before I could decide, I heard Zoe's footsteps in the hallway, soft and tentative. She paused outside my door. I held my breath, diary page burning in my palm, waiting to see what she'd do next. I stared at Zoe sitting at the end of my bed, hugging her knees, her hair falling over her eyes. The silence stretched. I could smell the faint, sweet scent of her shampoo, something strawberry, and hear the thump of the washing machine down the hall, like distant footsteps. My hands twisted in the hem of my hoodie. She didn't look up at first. "You want to know how I knew?" she asked quietly. Her voice sounded older, almost careful, like she was picking her way through a minefield. I nodded. My throat felt tight, like I'd swallowed a pebble. "Yeah, I need to know." She finally met my eyes. I could see her trying to decide if she could really say it out loud. "You left your phone open on the desk. That night you were crying in the bathroom? I was worried, so I went to get your charger, and I saw the texts." She swallowed. "The ones where you told Jamie you're not just pretending to like girls." The words hung in the air, thick and electric. I'd always been so careful. My phone was supposed to be locked. My cheeks burned. My stomach twisted. "I'm sorry," Zoe said, almost whispering. "I didn't mean to read your messages. You seemed so different the last few months. Sadder. I thought maybe it was something I did." Her lip trembled, and I realized she was just as scared as I was. She pulled her diary out of her backpack, fingers tracing the battered pink cover almost absent-mindedly. "I wrote about it in here. About how I thought maybe you liked girls, and how I didn't know if I was supposed to ask or just pretend I didn't notice. I never wanted anyone to see it. I swear." The air in my room felt thick. I could hear the faint hum of my laptop still open on my desk, the drone of my tired old fan. "So it wasn't about spying on me?" I asked, my voice shaking. She shook her head so hard her ponytail whipped. "No, it was just me, trying to figure out how to help. Or at least not make it worse." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I looked at Zoe, really looked at her, for the first time in weeks. My little sister, the one who'd always followed me around like a shadow, the girl who'd tried to build a secret fort in our closet and cried when I said I was too old. Suddenly, the fear drained away, replaced by something softer and sadder. "You deserve the whole story," I said. My voice sounded small. "I am gay. I've been hiding it because I didn't want to make things weird at home. Or with you." She blinked, tears pooling in the corners of her eyes. "You thought I'd care?" she said, and her voice broke. "You're still my sister. That's all I care about." I felt something inside me crumble, like I'd been holding up a wall for so long, I forgot there was air on the other side. "Thanks, Zoe," I whispered. She reached over and hugged me, her arms warm around my shoulders. I could smell the faint detergent on her sleeve, the salt of her tears. "I'm sorry I wrote it down," she muttered into my shoulder. I had to tell someone. Even if it was just paper. For a moment, we stayed like that, just breathing together, the whole world shrinking to the messy safety of my bed. Then I pulled away, wiping my cheeks. "So, who found your diary?" She shrugged, a smile tugging at her lips for the first time in days. "I think Mom." She didn't say anything, but she left it on my pillow. I guess that was her way of saying she knows, too. The words landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling outward. For the first time, I didn't panic. I almost laughed. "Guess we're all terrible at secrets in this family." Zoe grinned. "Yeah, but maybe that's good. It's strange, but in the aftermath, things didn't explode. No big fights. Mom started leaving little notes for both of us. Just, 'Love you,' or 'Proud of you,' on napkins tucked into our lunches. Dad gave me a weird, too long hug at breakfast and said, 'You good?' I just nodded, and that was that. Zoe and I started talking more. Not just about big stuff. About homework, about TV shows, about the funny things our cat does when she thinks no one's watching. She'd read me pages from her new diary, but only if I promised to keep her spelling mistakes a secret. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her in the room next door, scribbling away, her lamp making a yellow square on the wall. I'd feel lighter, not so much like I was slipping through the shadows in my own house. I guess what I'm saying is, losing the diary should have been a disaster, but it cracked something open instead. Secrets, it turns out, only have power when they're bottled up. When you finally let someone else in, even if it's messy and awkward and terrifying, you can breathe again. Maybe not perfectly, but honestly. And in a way, my sister's missing diary, and the secret she exposed about me, ended up giving us both something bigger, trust. And a second chance at being the kind of sisters who don't need to hide. 2 years ago, my best friend Jamie and I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, swearing, over a melting pint of ice cream, that we'd never keep secrets from each other again. It sounds dramatic, but you would have done the same if you'd been through what we had. Someone at school had started a rumor about Jamie, something dumb but sticky, and it spread like wildfire. I didn't know the truth, and I'd avoided asking. That silence almost cost us our friendship. When we finally talked, really talked, we realized how easily everything could fall apart over something as stupid as gossip. So, we promised, never again, no secrets, not even small ones. Back then, Jamie and I were inseparable. We grew up 2 blocks apart, in a neighborhood where the mailboxes lean sideways and everyone's backyard blurs into the next. We'd carve our initials into the biggest tree in the park, walk to the corner store for gummy worms, and race our bikes down the cracked pavement every summer evening. Our pact was more than words, it was a shield, a way to keep the world, and all its drama, on the outside. But life isn't a movie, and shields get cracks. The last year has felt different. We didn't have a big fight, or a single moment when everything changed. It was more like driftwood, slowly floating apart without realizing it. College applications took over our weekends, and Jamie started dating someone new from her physics class. I'd see them together sometimes, laughing at inside jokes I didn't know. She began missing our usual Friday night hangouts, texting me late with apologies about so much homework or family stuff. I tried not to take it personally. Still, I noticed things. Jamie started keeping her phone face down on the table when we were together. She'd pause before answering questions, little hesitations that felt louder than words. Conversations used to flow easily between us, but now, sometimes, it felt like we were both picking our way across a frozen pond, afraid to step too hard. It wasn't anything big, yet it added up. Unanswered texts, missed calls, and a sense that our no secrets pact was gathering dust somewhere between us. All of this was swirling in my head last Saturday. It was raining, the kind that taps insistently against the windows and makes the whole house smell like wet asphalt. My parents were out for the day, and I decided it was finally time to tackle the basement. The place was an absolute disaster. Boxes haphazardly stacked, old sports gear scattered everywhere, and a layer of dust that made me sneeze every 5 minutes. I set up my playlist, pulled on mismatched socks, and started dragging things into piles. About an hour in, I cracked open a battered cardboard box labeled Misc. Somewhere between a tangle of Christmas lights and a cracked snow globe, I found an envelope tucked beneath a stack of faded report cards. My stomach did this weird little flip when I saw my name written in Jamie's looping handwriting. I sat down on the cold cement floor and slid my finger under the flap. Inside was a faded note from years ago. Jamie had written it after we'd made our no secrets pact. No matter what, it said, promise me you'll always tell me the truth. Even if it's hard. I smiled at the memory and traced her words with my thumb. The paper felt soft at the edges, warmed by all the years it had spent in the dark. It struck me, sitting there in the dim basement light, just how much things had changed. I missed us. The way things had been before growing up started splitting us into different people. I thought about texting Jamie a picture of the note, but stopped myself. For some reason, I wanted to keep it, just for a little while, like a secret of my own. That's when I noticed something odd. Behind the old box, there was a part of the wall that didn't quite match the rest. The paint was newer, the surface smoother, like it had been patched up recently. For a second, I wondered if I'd ever noticed it before. I reached out, brushing my fingers along the edge. There was the faintest outline of a door, almost invisible, hidden in plain sight. My heart started pounding, loud enough that I could hear it in my ears. Who would put a door in a basement wall? And why hadn't I ever seen it before? I glanced down at Jamie's note again, suddenly feeling like the universe was nudging me forward. I had no idea what I was about to find, but the weirdest part, the part that made my pulse jump, was that I couldn't shake the feeling Jamie was connected to this secret, somehow. I pressed my palm against the cool surface, half expecting it not to budge. But with a soft click, the hidden door swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. I hesitated, my breath frosting in the chill air spilling out from the room. And even though I was alone, I found myself whispering, Jamie, what did you do? I wasn't even supposed to be in the basement that day. The whole thing started because Mom wanted me to finally clear out the mountain of boxes we'd been ignoring for years. I remember grumbling to myself, brushing away cobwebs while the old fluorescent light flickered and buzzed overhead. The smell down there was a mix of mildew, cardboard, and dust so thick it felt like I could taste it with every breath. My sneakers crunched over gritty concrete, and I shoved aside stacks of my dad's old high school trophies, half expecting a spider to dart out at any moment. I was wrestling with a heavy box when my foot caught on something hard and unsteady, almost sending me crashing headfirst into the wall. Swearing quietly, I steadied myself and looked down. At first, it looked like just another warped bit of drywall, but there was a thin, uneven gap running down one side, just behind an ancient exercise bike nobody had touched since the early 2000s. I squinted, running my hand along the cold, gritty surface. My fingers caught on a corner, a tiny edge that didn't line up with the rest of the basement wall. Curiosity got the better of me. I slid a screwdriver from the toolbox nearby and wedged it into the gap. With a few careful pries and a puff of stale, musty air, a panel popped loose, sending a small avalanche of dried leaves and dust into my lap. I coughed, waving away the cloud. Behind the panel, I saw an opening just big enough for me to squeeze through if I ducked. My pulse quickened. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting someone to be watching, then aimed my phone flashlight into the darkness. The beam cut through thick webs and revealed a narrow crawlspace, the ground littered with forgotten bits of plastic and what looked like the remains of a very old mouse nest. I hesitated, heart pounding in my throat. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind. But I couldn't help myself. There was something too strange, too out of place about this hidden hollow in the house I thought I knew by heart. I crouched, sliding awkwardly inside. The air grew colder, stale and heavy. My knees scraped rough concrete, and I had to duck my head so I wouldn't hit the low beams above. At the back of the space, past the reach of the basement light, the crawl space widened abruptly into a tiny, hidden room. The walls were unfinished, the floor covered in a thin layer of dirt and debris. I caught the scent of something old and sweet, like dried flowers or time-worn paper. My flashlight picked out shapes in the gloom: boxes, a chair with a broken leg, a rolled-up sleeping bag, and what looked like an old backpack slumped against the far wall. My breath came in shallow bursts as I brushed away the dust, half expecting some long-buried secret to leap out at me. That's when I noticed the initials, drawn in faded permanent marker on the backpack's flap, JD. My stomach flipped. Those were Jamie's initials, a detail I knew by heart from a lifetime of passing notes and doodling on each other's stuff. The bag was old, clearly, but why would Jamie's backpack be here? Had they been in my house, in this hidden room, without telling me? My grip tightened on the flashlight as I unzipped the main compartment, nervous energy buzzing in my fingertips. Inside, I found more dust, a half-empty water bottle, a pack of gum so stale it had fused into a brick, and then, tucked at the bottom, a battered composition notebook. Its cover was warped and scuffed, the corners curled from years of use. I flipped it open with trembling hands. The first page had a list of dates and short entries written in a hurried scrawl, the handwriting unmistakably Jamie's. I recognized the looping lowercase g's, the way they always pressed too hard on the pen, leaving indents on the next page. Next to the backpack, stacked neatly in a shoebox, was a pile of carefully folded letters. Some were in colorful envelopes, others just sheets of lined paper, all addressed to Jaybird. I felt a chill run over my skin. I'd never heard that nickname before, not once in all the years Jamie and I had been inseparable. My fingers tingled as I traced the name on one of the envelopes, the ink slightly smudged as if someone had cried while writing or reading it. The room was eerily silent except for the faint drip of a leaky pipe somewhere overhead. I sat cross-legged in the dirt, the cold seeping through my jeans, and picked up the first letter. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the writing cramped but lively. I unfolded it, the sound crackling in the quiet. "Dear Jaybird," it began. I read, eyes darting over lines that talked about secrets, running away, and missing someone dearly. The tone was warm, teasing, and familiar, but the signature at the bottom wasn't a name. Just an initial, M. My hands shook as I shuffled through the rest of the letters. Each one was to Jamie, Jaybird, from M, telling stories about sneaking out, hiding from grown-ups, and dreams of leaving town together someday. The latest was dated almost exactly 2 years ago, right around the time Jamie and I made our no secrets pact. I flipped open the battered notebook, reading snippets between the lines. Jamie had written about feeling trapped, about finding the only place I can breathe. They wrote about missing someone, about a promise to keep the room, and what happened here, secret. I pressed my palm to the dirt, grounding myself. Why had Jamie never told me about this place? More importantly, who was M, and why did they call Jamie Jaybird? I snapped a photo of the backpack and one of the letters, not to share, but just to prove to myself that this was real. After all, who would believe me if I said I'd found a secret room in my own house, and it was filled with the hidden pieces of my best friend's past? I tried to organize my thoughts, but everything felt tangled. I decided I needed answers, straight from Jamie. A few hours later, I texted Jamie, my thumb hovering over the screen. "Hey, got something weird to show you at my place. Can you come by?" Jamie responded with their usual, "Sure, what's up?" and a thumbs up emoji. I felt my nerves wind tighter as I waited. I kept replaying the memory of the hidden room, the letters, the backpack, every detail sharp as glass. When Jamie showed up, their sneakers squeaked on our kitchen tile. I led them down to the basement without saying much, just feeling their curious gaze on the back of my head. "You finally cleaning this place out?" Jamie joked, wrinkling their nose at the smell. "Found something," I said simply, turning my phone flashlight on and guiding them to the loose panel. Jamie froze when I pulled it aside and revealed the hidden room. For a heartbeat, they didn't move. I caught a flash of something in their eyes, recognition, maybe, or fear. "Jamie," I said, my voice shaking a little, "does this look familiar?" Jamie tried to play it off, kicking at a pebble. "I mean, it's just, wow, that's crazy. You didn't know this was here?" I shook my head and stepped aside so Jamie could see the backpack, the letters, and the notebook. Their face went pale. "Want to tell me why your stuff is in a secret room in my house?" I asked, trying to keep my tone gentle, but I couldn't hide the hurt. Jamie swallowed, their jaw tight. I don't know what you're talking about." I stared at them, not blinking, until finally, Jamie sighed and looked away. "Can we not do this right now?" They took a step toward the crawlspace exit. I blocked their path, heart pounding. "Jamie, please, I deserve to know." For a long moment, I thought Jamie might actually push past me and leave. Then their shoulders slumped, and they let out a shaky breath. "Okay," Jamie said, voice thick. "Just, don't freak out, okay?" The tension in the air was so thick I could feel it pressing on my skin. I nodded, swallowing hard. Jamie sat down on the cracked folding chair, running a hand through their hair. Dust drifted in the flashlight's glare. "I used to come here when things were bad at home," Jamie began quietly. "I'd sneak in through the side window. Nobody ever came down here, so I figured I was safe." I listened, barely breathing. Jamie's voice trembled. "The letters, they're from my sister, Miranda. I called her M. She left home a long time ago, before you and I even met. Nobody ever talks about her. I didn't want anyone to know I still talked to her, especially not my parents." I stared at Jamie, trying to process. "You never told me you had a sister." "I know," Jamie whispered. "I couldn't. After she left, my parents acted like she'd never existed. I was scared if I talked about her, I'd lose her too. So I'd come here, read her letters, write in my journal when things got bad. This was my place, my secret." A leak somewhere in the ceiling dripped onto the concrete, echoing in the silence. I tried to find the right words, but they all felt clumsy. Jamie looked up at me, eyes bright with tears. "Please, you can't tell anyone. If my parents find out, or anyone else." Their voice caught, and for the first time, I saw how scared they were, not just of being found out, but of losing this last connection to Miranda. "I promise," I said, even though part of me felt a sharp sting. We'd sworn never to keep secrets again, but here was one so big it had changed everything between us. For days after, I couldn't shake the feeling of the secret pressing against my chest. Every time I saw Jamie at school or texted them, I wondered what else I didn't know. I caught myself searching our memories, questioning which moments were real and which were performed, trying to cover up pain I never saw. One night, lying awake, I started to wonder if Jamie ever really trusted me. Were we really best friends if they could hide something so huge? Or was I the one who failed, too busy with my own life to notice the signs? But then I remembered the look on Jamie's face in that hidden room, the way their voice trembled, the raw fear in their eyes. Maybe some secrets felt too heavy to share, even with your best friend. Maybe keeping Miranda a secret was how Jamie survived. Still, I was torn. Part of me wanted to tell my parents, to demand answers about who else knew about the hidden room, about Miranda, and why nobody said anything. Another part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, to pretend I'd never seen any of it, and just let Jamie have their escape. The next time I saw Jamie, I tried to act normal, but the air between us had changed. Every laugh, every inside joke, felt touched by the shadow of that secret space under my house. I wanted to ask more, to pry deeper, but I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I waited, hoping that Jamie would choose to share more with me when they were ready. But I still wondered, could our friendship survive a secret like this? Or was something already broken, something I could never put back together? What I didn't realize was that the biggest test was still coming. Because secrets like this, they don't stay hidden forever. And sooner or later, something else would force the truth into the light. It took us a couple of days to even agree to go down there again. The awkwardness between Jamie and me was raw and obvious, like standing outside in the cold with a wet shirt on. But we both knew we couldn't avoid it forever. Saturday afternoon, sunlight barely creeping through the tiny basement window, we stood side by side in front of the narrow doorway that had once hidden everything. I could smell the old stone, musty cardboard, dust from decades. Jamie's breathing was shallow. I could see her hands tremble a little as she touched the box with her name written on it. My own heart hammered so loudly it seemed to echo off the brick. "I never wanted you to find out this way," Jamie finally whispered. I glanced over, searching her face for any trace of anger or resentment, but all I saw was fear and something almost like relief. Wordlessly, I reached into the box and pulled out the last envelope, the one we hadn't dared open the first time. My fingers brushed the thick paper, and I could feel her eyes on me. My mouth was dry. Do you want to read it together? I asked. She nodded. We sat cross-legged on the floor, knees almost touching. Jamie steadied her hand and opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in her brother's looping handwriting. He died 3 years ago, and Jamie had never talked about him much. The words spilled out quietly, Jamie reading aloud, tears sliding down her cheeks. Apologies, regrets, memories of their last fight. He'd hidden the letter after their argument, planning to give it to her once he'd cooled off, but he never got the chance. The ache in my chest was sharp and sudden. I thought about all the times Jamie had brushed off my questions about her family, all the sleepovers cut short when she'd get too quiet, and it finally clicked. When she finished reading, the silence was thick, but somehow it didn't feel heavy anymore. I was so scared you'd look at me differently, Jamie said, rubbing her eyes. Her voice was raw, like I was broken or something. I let out a shaky breath. Jamie, you're my best friend. I wish you'd told me, but I get it now. I reached out, squeezing her hand until her fingers squeezed back. There was grime under both our nails, and the floor was gritty, but it didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were really seeing each other. We sat there, talking until the light shifted and the basement grew colder. Jamie shared stories about her brother, inside jokes, trips, the way he'd made up songs for her when she couldn't sleep. There were things I admitted, too, small secrets I'd been embarrassed about. The time I almost failed chemistry but lied about my grades, the panic attacks I hid on bad days. Each confession let in a bit more warmth, easing the ache that had built up for years. Jamie sniffed and laughed a little. So, new pact? She asked, nudging my shoulder. I smiled, remembering how we'd made that first promise years ago, swearing on pinkies and sugar cookies that we'd always tell each other the truth. Yeah, new pact, I said. But this time, we're allowed to not have all the right words. As long as we try. Deal, she said, grinning through tears. No more secret rooms. Or, at least, if there are, we open them together. We laughed, the sound echoing off stone and wood, and for a second I let myself believe that all the hurt from the past was dissolving in the musty air. Sunlight flickered out completely, but we didn't rush upstairs. We just sat there, leaning on each other, letting the quiet settle. Looking back, I think that hidden room changed us. Not because of what was inside, although that mattered, but because we finally stopped pretending we were fine when we weren't. That space, with its peeling paint and water stains, became the place where Jamie and I started again. Where we learned that sometimes secrets aren't about betrayal, they're about wounds we're not ready to show, even to the people we love most. So, that's why I'm telling you this now. Not because I want sympathy, or because I have all the answers, but because if there's a locked door in your life, maybe it's time to open it with someone you trust. For Jamie and me, the hardest part wasn't the secret, it was the silence. And breaking it, together, was how everything finally